I've never hunted your farm.
Mm-mm.
You know, and I'm sure I could be like, hey, Jared, can I come hunt your farm? And I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't want to put you in that position. Like, that's what I'm saying. There's that understanding of the dynamic.
Well, let's put him in that position. Let's ask him.
He doesn't have any deer for me to kill anyways.
Well, that's the problem. HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, we've been using Deer Grow products for a long time. The Plot Start and Plot Boost, more recently Plot Till. Now we've got 3 new liquid fertilizers that have been put in the mix that will cover everything we could want for a food plot program.
It's huge, man. The more food plotting we do, it's like, man, the liquids just make sense. Like whether it's herbicides or the Plot Start and Plot Boost, and now the fertilizers getting mixed in. It's like, man, I can combine all of those in certain cases and do less passes for more results.
I mean, it's all about efficiency. I mean, like you said, less passes. If you're out there treating your beans with glyphosate in the summertime, you can mix in this fertilizer, do that all at once. You have the boost in there to help some metabolism. It's all about efficiency when we're talking about food plots. And really the big difference on these liquid fertilizers is you're bypassing some of these soil limitations, pH limitations, the soil type. In a lot of cases, we talk about dry fertilizers only being available for 17% of what you put down in the first year. These liquid fertilizers straight into the plant are 90% available in the first year. Huge difference in what you're going to see in growth.
It's huge. And so right now you can use code HUNTR15 for 15% off any of the Deer Grow products on their website. And as always,
better food plots, bigger deer. And we're back.
Ew.
HUNTR Podcast, episode 237, as Nick keeps us in line.
Yeah.
Nick, Stash is back.
Stash is back.
Very nice.
Still rocking that corduroy hat. Right?
I still am. All my other hats have sweat stains all over them, so I got to wash them up.
Yeah, you can't wear that one in sweat. Like,
No.
it would just immediately just be a sponge.
Yeah, this is my leisure hat.
Leisure hat.
Yeah.
Is that
Just
a local bakery?
If you had a corduroy leisure suit, you'd be in the stash. Whoa.
I could see Nick in a tracksuit.
Yeah, a tracksuit with a mustache.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very
It
nice.
might be the vibe.
Yeah.
It's a vibe. For
It's
sure.
a vibe that's, yeah, I don't know what kind of vibe that would be, but it is a vibe. You want to do your part?
Yeah. Hey, thank you guys for being here. We appreciate you tuning in every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern is when we drop these episodes. They air on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. You can give us a like, follow, or a subscribe on any one of those channels. They will notify you as to when these drop. We appreciate you guys tuning in. If you've written us on Instagram DM or the website, the Instagram, we appreciate you guys reaching out. We diligently try to get back through all of those. If we have not, apologize for the delayed response, but
We're getting there.
We're working on that. We have some merch on the website too. We have some water bottles, some hats, some shirts, I think we have some hoodies and stuff like that. It's all good stuff. A portion of that goes to paying Nick's salary, so he appreciats you purchasing some of that.
That's how he gets corduroy hats.
That is how he can afford a corduroy hat like that. And he's saving up for the tracksuit. So, and other than that, here we go.
Here we go. It is, today is January 30th. Nick said this is February 11th.
Yes.
It's my mom's birthday. Happy birthday.
Coming up on Valentine's Day, right?
Coming up on Valentine's Day.
What do we have? Margie was like, what's the plan for Valentine's? And I was like, I'm pretty sure we have something. We're going.
It's pretty good that you deferred to me on Valentine's Day to your wife.
Because I recall you saying we're not going to be here. That's something, right?
I remember.
Let me, I'm going to guess.
I think I have NWTF around then.
Is that the Quest thing?
It is.
Yeah, that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to see about that, I guess.
I haven't heard anything.
Okay. Well, we'll check in.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be in NWTF around there too in Nashville.
Okay.
So we'll figure it out.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
HUNTR's wives.
Yeah, they're used to it.
Yeah, she was surprisingly very cool about it. She's like, yeah, whatever.
You make it a big day?
No, I hate Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
I remodeled our master bathroom. That's currently underway.
Well, that's great.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's
That's a nice
Day.
gift.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Probably our most expensive one so far, for sure.
Yeah, that's a big gift.
I enjoy getting the chocolate covered strawberries for my girl, and then I
Put them on your
half of
nipples.
Yeah.
Very
Like they're pretty
nice.
big, and they
Very
taste
nice.
great.
You go chocolate covered. Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
That's
Chocolate,
good.
you can never go wrong with chocolate. I'll tell you what, dude, my wife is a chocolate fiend.
Yeah.
Like, I'll buy her chocolate just as a nice gesture at the grocery store, and it's gone.
It's
like
gone.
the next day. I never
Dang.
see her eating it, but I see our rations rapidly depleting. Excuse me.
You sure your dogs aren't eating it?
Yes. It's an upper cupboard.
She
She goes after the chocolate for sure.
Yeah, it goes for
I'm
it.
sure she'll appreciate me saying that too. So,
Well, I mean,
Eh.
you run an ice cream shop. She's got to be in tune
you
with
know what
the,
we were
the
contemplating
flavors.
the other day is like I mean, Saris has a strong chocolate brand.
They
right?
do.
If we could
Saris
do
candies.
a Saris chocolate dipped ice cream cone, vanilla ice cream cone, that would be
Where's
that would be a banger.
Is Saris local?
Yeah, they're in I'm gonna say, is that It's a Canonsburg area.
Canonsburg?
What is that little town I go through? I pass there all the time on the way to the farm. It's like Canonsburg area, I believe.
Yeah.
They have they got an ice cream shop down there and stuff too. It's pretty sweet.
I found I had my little lone wolf bag with me when I was hunting this week, and I was like, boy, I'm starving. I started digging in. I found this little baggie of animal crackers, but they were dipped in like white chocolate.
Oh, wow.
Fire.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Oh, yeah. I know what
Really,
you're talking about.
really good for the blind.
Can't go wrong with animal crackers.
Oh.
Ever.
Yeah.
The pink dip. That's what you want.
Yeah.
That's what the original.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was good.
Pink
It was good
frosting.
stuff. It was great. So anyways, it's the 11th. February 11th. We've kind of been talking sheds, obviously, on the table for a reason. None of these from this year, but soon.
Isn't that surprising?
Soon to be picking up.
I really, when you pulled this out earlier,
I would have said it was 150-inch 8-point.
It takes a big 8-point to go 150.
He doesn't have the mass, and that's gonna be that hurt him.
I measured. I gave him out. He's 4 1/4 at the baser, so I gave him 4, 4, 4, and 2. I was just rounding.
Yeah.
I was being pretty liberal with
Yeah.
my guessing there, but 143.5. But
Still big 8.
And I think that's a spitting image of the one, honestly, that I. So that's probably what he is.
Probably mid 50s next year then.
One can only hope.
One can only hope. So anyways, yeah, it's mid-February. We're kind of up in the air. Like, what do we do now? Habitat work. Starting to look for sheds here in the very near future. Maybe have found some by the time this airs.
When is this going to air?
Yeah. We've got some shows that we're bobbing around to. We had just got back from the Great American Outdoor Show because that NWTF coming up. And yeah, that's we're just in this like winter rut at this point. Not in a good way.
We're coming out. Yeah, we're coming out.
Yeah.
Coming out swinging.
Coming out swinging. It's going to be like, hopefully as this is airing, like we just came out of like a pretty warm spell, like 50s and like even some 60s in Southern Ohio, which is insane because we've been frozen.
Yeah.
It's a tease. It'll go away.
I know that's the bummer. I was looking at, I don't know if you're a Farmer's Almanac guy, but they're calling for a lingering winter this year.
I'll trust Punxsutawney Phil in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And see what that son of a
Damn
bitch
groundhog
says.
out
In
here.
a couple days.
It's next on Sunday, February 2nd.
Holy crap.
Really?
Yeah, Sunday's Groundhog Day.
Wow. How many times do you think they've swapped that thing out without telling us?
Oh, a lot.
Bastards.
I went one time when I was in, I don't know, I was probably either a freshman or sophomore in high school, and we went. My grandma and my grandpa took us.
You saw the hog?
I saw the hog. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Is he
it is
as big as he thought?
yeah, he's chunky, girthy.
Yeah. He's a round one.
Yeah, he's around. Major party, at least at that time. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was wild because it was like all the
I bet it
IUP
is.
kids and stuff,
Okay.
just wild. Like people just drunk out
That's
of
a
their minds.
Great
It's like
excuse to get drunk. This groundhog's gonna see you
it's
shout out.
10 degrees out. You know,
That's
it's just
hilarious.
yeah. It was wild.
Epic. I would go for that.
Also, great movie with Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Is that still open for public attendance? I'd consider
yeah.
if that's
Dude,
the vibe, I'd go.
Gobbler's Knob.
Sorry,
That's what it is.
that's where they have it.
Yeah, Gobbler's Knob in Punxsutawney.
Really?
Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania.
Wonder if that's what ours is named after.
I would assume it is. I thought that's why you called it that.
I don't call it that. The name, it's been called that. If we inherited the name,
Maybe it's because of turkeys,
I would assume so. Yeah, probably right.
but could be because of Punxsutawney
Could
Phil.
be.
Could be a big hog up there too.
Could be a hog up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, giant Phil Bird up there. Anyways, we got a guest today. A recent acquaintance that we met at the archery trade show.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of these shows, is right, just walking around and hanging out. And so we got Greg Glesinger on. So Greg has HUNTWorks now. Also in the past from the Drury aspects, dream season and stuff.
That's where I recognized him from. Apparently, I was like, he can tell a story. I grabbed him like in the hallway there, and I was like, I know you.
You're just eyeballing this guy.
Yeah, and I was just like,
Where do I know you?
I just felt
from?
like I'd seen him enough times that I was like, I know you. Like, we have enough mutual acquaintances here that we need to like get connected or whatever. And And there were quite a few of them. I mean, obviously it was from juries where most people recognize him from. Good friend of Bomars as well. He was well acquainted with our whole Iowa experience and stuff too. So, and then
Rising as well.
And Rising also through the jury thing here, but I ended up hitting it off with Greg, I felt, and he's a really smart guy, done really well in business and in life, and
seems to be a common trend.
You know, has a lot of like what we aspire in terms of land ownership and management, and he's doing some really cool stuff in sounds like mainly Missouri and Iowa, and so I thought it would be a fun conversation.
Yeah, it'd be a cool conversation around like we were just talking to him there. You know, Greg's from Wisconsin, and you know his focus a lot is going to these other states to manage properties, and you know we find ourselves kind of asking the same question. It's like, man, are we crazy for having these places that we're just leaving home to go to and, spend all this time or hunt half the time there because of the drive and the distance versus like it being in our backyard. I
think what's fun about Greg in our initial conversation is I'm sure he gets asked like, you're on juries and stuff. So he gets all the time, so, how do I grow a big buck, this and that. So it's fun, like when we're asking him questions and he's looking back at you, he's like, you're asking the right questions. So it's fun. It fires you up to be like, okay, we're on the right path here.
We're on the same wavelength.
Lead me.
Yeah. How do I do it?
Teach us.
Yeah, teach us. So, let's pull Greg in.
How are you guys today?
Good.
All right, brother.
Welcome.
Well,
Thanks, guys.
We obviously, we talked enough at ATA, but we're like, boy, we should get Greg on and like really just continue to dive into the discussion. We occupied that aisle for quite a while.
Yeah.
I was like, we should have recorded that because that was a good 40 minutes probably.
Oh, yeah.
If not longer.
Well, when you start digging, hopefully the feeling was mutual. It's like when you connect on stuff like that, you're like, oh, dude, it's like we could stood there for another 4 hours. And so here we are 2 weeks later.
Oh, no. Yeah, I completely agree. Anytime you're talking about deer and deer management and how to grow these crazy animals, it's always fun to relate to somebody who's just as passionate and as driven as we are. So, and there's a lot of us out there. I mean, there's a whole building full of them. So
I know, man.
That's always fun about going to ATA.
Yeah, for sure. Well, dude, Greg, if you want to start, maybe just correct or add on to our intro of you about maybe where people may have seen you, the states that you're occupying, and just maybe your general stance, however you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So, born and raised in Papillion, Nebraska, which is a suburb of Omaha, and pretty much a bird hunter my whole life. Obviously, that's what we had, and was lucky enough to have really close relatives. My uncle, who's no longer with us, God bless his soul, Jerry, my dad's brother. He had 3 sons, John, Jeff, and Jim, and those guys pretty much took me under their wing and made me an outdoorsman that I am today, without a doubt. Without those guys, I wouldn't be here. And then to fast forward really to my late 20s, I think it was 27, I believe. I was dating my current wife at the time, was my girlfriend, and she took me up to Akeley, Minnesota, which is a small town outside of Walker, basically 3 hours north of Minneapolis, middle of nowhere, where her brother was shooting a bow in his backyard of Fred Bear. I'll never forget it, for the first time, and he was sighting it in, and I didn't know anything about it. And he handed me the bow and said, what do you think? We're same height, everything. And I shot it, and she looked at me and she goes, you don't need another hobby. And that really is where it all started. I came back and hooked up with my local archery shop, which is Little John's Archery, 3rd generation, here just down the street from where I live, outside of Madison, Wisconsin, and just dove in. Back then it was articles, books, seminars. It wasn't internet and YouTube. So I would leave to go to different trade shows just to go to seminars and listen to the guys that were doing the circuit, and just learning those type of ins and outs to basically figure out the craft. And had mutual friends that knew Mark Drury, and got introduced to him, and I was killing some big stuff, and he chased me for a few years. I turned him down, believe it or not, because I did not want a extra camera guy in the tree, because it's double the scent, double the sound, double the movement. I didn't want to do it. And finally he just said, hey, what if I just set you guy and you don't have to worry about it? And he basically wore me out. And I finally said yes. And you guys probably know this gentleman. I believe you do. His name is Adam Keith.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And so Adam was my first camera guy, and he was in college at the time. And
Interesting.
so, yeah, it's a small circle.
And Adam is involved with you guys at HuntWorks now, right? I believe I saw that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. So he came up, filmed. We killed a 154, 156, something like that, mid-50s on the last day. And we became friends, and he went back to school, and then he went to go on to work for Grant Woods. Yep. And obviously we kindled our relationship later in life, but that was the beginning of it. That deer was the second or third largest that year, I believe, for jury. So that kind of springboarded me into some credibility, and so forth. The year prior, I shot a 163, which would have been the largest deer shot in jury if I was a team member. I wasn't a team member at the time, and that's when Mark really turned the heat up on me and said, "Hey, we want you." And this is going back almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and so where were you doing most of that hunting originally, Greg? Is that in Nebraska?
That was all in Iowa. That was Iowa and Missouri back then.
So you knew about Iowa even back then. You were making the journey.
Well, it's an interesting story because I landed there purely because being here outside of Madison, we all know that Buffalo County in Wisconsin is, the #1 Boone and Crockett in the country last time I checked. So I went up there a lot trying to find a piece of ground and just to cut my teeth, and everything was so expensive. And it was driven by the out-of-staters, predominantly Texas and so forth. And so I don't know what gave me the intuition to do this, but I got down a map, and from my door to up there, it's about 4 hours, 3.5 to 4 hours, depending on where you are in the county. And so I'm like, okay, if I take a 4-hour radius around my house, where does that put me? I never dawned on it was going to put me in Iowa. Mindset wasn't there. I was thinking Wisconsin and Illinois.
Yeah.
Because Madison is just about 35, 40 minutes north of the Illinois line.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, well, I did the circle, and I started looking, started making some phone calls, and the ground down there was, believe it or not, it was about, you could buy 3 to 3.5 acres per one in Wisconsin. So I quickly pivoted and started going down there and found a piece. And once I figured this all out, I'm like, 20, 30 years from now, when I want to slow down and have time, I want to have land in 2 states. And so that's been my goal for about over 20 years. Of when I say 2 states, it's Missouri, because Missouri is only 20 miles from my house in Iowa. It's only 12 miles straight south, 10 miles straight south to the border. So I just finally built a house just a couple of years ago. I was living I'd rent a hotel for weeks. I go down there, book a hotel, give them X amount of dollars for 6 to 8 weeks, and just leave my stuff and come and go as I wanted. I did that for 15 years, probably, if not longer. Bounced around between friends. Jared Lurk let me stay to his house for a long time. Mark Drury let me stay to his house for a long time. And then finally I just figured out the hotel thing, because I was just carrying around so much gear, and then the camera guy came in fact, and it just became too much. So I just started, it was cheap. When I say cheap, you don't have property tax, you don't have to worry about it, you get clean bed, all that stuff. And I'd give them like $1,500 for 6 weeks and walk away.
Yeah.
And so when you look at all the headaches, it's like, it's a smart thing to do. So I did that for, I don't know, 13, 14 years probably.
Jeez.
And then built my own, and just kind of was with jury for a decade and a half, 14, 15 years. I was part of Natural Born. I was part of Dream Season. I was part of, all of them. Towards the end, the last run was Bow Madness, which still runs today. I was part of that for the last 3 or 4 years before I left, and I left in March of 22 is when I left. Wow. And everything was good. I had no intentions of leaving. It was all on good terms, and I had no intentions of really doing my own thing. It was just that I had won Producer of the Year many times and won everything that we could do, and it was just kind of run its course. And I just said, enough's enough, and walked away. And then about 12 or 13 partners had called me within a few weeks, and and said, "Hey, we heard you left. Is it true?" I said, "Yeah." And they go, "If you want to do your own thing, we're interested." And I said, "I'm not interested. That's not why I left. I just want to slow down." And my son, Derek, is the one who convinced me to do it. He said, "You're going to be irrelevant here in a season or two. And if you don't do it now, you never will." And we have to backtrack, we have a poster in his hallway where our kid's bedroom is, says, "Be so good, people can't ignore you." And he used that against me. And so
that's what I say to
he
Jeremy.
pretty much
Be undeniable is how I say it.
Yeah. And so he pretty much called me out, and I'm like, you know what? I better try this just to set an example more than anything. And so now we just finished filming season 3, which I can't believe I'm saying that.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah, time goes really fast. So it's been very interesting. I mean, front of the camera hasn't changed a bit. Back of the camera I will give Drew Outdoors a ton of credit. It is way more difficult than I ever understood or had any intuition of even knowing. And it is a ton of work. Yeah. So anybody who takes this on, good luck. It is way more than you think it's going to be.
Yeah. What do you mean by that, Greg? You mean from a production standpoint primarily, or from a business?
Yeah, all of it. The business side of it, the partnership side of it, the demands of the partnerships, the timelines, the editing. When you're the face and you're, like when we were part of juries, you just film it, and we had to log it in a certain fashion, and we sent it to the editors, and that was it. That's all we had to do. And every once in a while, we get product, we get boxes in the mail, and show up, and that was it. We go hunt. No worries, no stress, no nothing. I mean, I am probably working this business. Well, my wife says I'm working HuntWorks more than I'm doing my full-time job. So, and it's because I love it. I really enjoy it. And I love people, and I enjoy all the partners in it. And I've been doing this, been in this space for probably, I don't know, I'm going to date myself, but almost 3 decades. Cause I don't know if I told you guys, but I was a big part of Bad Boy Buggies. I don't know if I told you that.
You told us that at ATA. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a lot of these networks have been a long time coming, and I know a lot of people. And so it's been fun. It's been my second life outside of my professional life. And it's a safe haven for me because I truly love it. It doesn't seem like work for me, and I really enjoy doing what we do. It's just way more work than I ever thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And Matt Drury and the whole team at HQ at Drury really made it look easy. And it's because I just didn't understand it.
Yeah. Right. I mean, Greg, what do you think was your biggest motivation? I mean, you mentioned like being an example to your son and stuff like that. I mean, why do you think that you chose to do this, to carry it on? I mean, what do you think is the driving factor?
When I sat down with 3 or 4 partners, they really respected what I had done in front of the camera for a decade and a half with Drury. And they said, "You have more to give." And they loved what I was doing. And I think it was the confidence that the partners had in me to say, you have what people want, and people want to listen to and turn into. So why quit? You're going to do it anyway, which I was going to do it anyway. I mean, because as long as God willing, I'll be behind a stick and a string as long as I can be. So why not, really go after it? So, and I said, as long as we stay relevant and people are in tune and they like what we're doing, I'll keep doing it. It's a challenge. It's fun. It opens up a lot of doors that I didn't think were possible because what we're doing, which I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of benefits to it. It's just there's a lot more work behind the scenes that I didn't see coming.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with the partners. I mean, not to butter you up too much, but I do think you have one of those personalities that it's like, and you have the experience and the track record to back it up. It's like you're easy to listen to. And Bill Winke's the greatest example of like the guy can go 3 seasons and not see a deer over 140 and people still tune in. And they're like, I just want to hear anything he has to say, including Jeremy and I. It's just like, man, I just think that, guys like that will always be relevant. And I think, maybe not to put words in yourself, we feel almost like a calling to like, I don't know in what capacity, like if you ask Jeremy, why do we do this? All those benefits that you mentioned and stuff, they're there, and the networking is fun and it's enjoyable, but it's like, it just seems like if you have an opportunity to have an influence on like an industry that you care about, then it's like, there's a sense of obligation that I think we feel.
Well, we're not doing it for the money. That's for sure. No. And that's what people think. And that's not the case. If you don't truly love this and really enjoy it, you look at look at the numbers and stuff and go, why are you doing this? You could do something way and put the same amount of time and do way better off. It's just that it's part of the DNA. It's what I do. I've been doing it my whole life. And it's like I said, I don't know if someone walked in and said, you're done today in your professional world, this is what I would do.
Yep.
Is I would go hunt and do what I want to do, and, you know, trim trees and plant food plots and do all those type of things, and have strategy sessions and try to figure out how we're going to kill, you know, whatever deer we're chasing at the time. So it's just, I don't know, I have a sidekick who's very, very part of this. His name is Casey Morgan, and the wife calls him my second wife, because I think we think about whitetails 365 days a year, 24/7 in some fashion. I'll get a text at 10 o'clock at night. I'll send him one, hey, what do you think about this on this part of the farm? What do you think about that? It's a disease, and I realize that, but I love it, and it's what I choose to do.
Yeah.
It is a weird obsession. Like, I don't, I have to believe there's other things. Like, if guys like love wakeboarding, they probably like hit up their other wakeboarding dudes and they're like, dude, freaking, I could hit this, like this McTwist or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I've never experienced that to the level.
I don't think so. And I'll tell
maybe
you
not.
Because it's so seasonal. Whitetail hunting is seasonal. It is.
Right.
But the prep work and when you kill them is all the work in the off season. That's how you kill them in the fall. You don't kill them in the fall because you didn't do any work in the spring and the summer. That's the work. So when, like, we're done now, we're actually sitting down, and as we move through our year, we put notes on our phones, and then we collab at the end of the year, and we go, okay, what's the priority, what we want to do, how are we going to get it done, and so forth. And that list we never get to it all. We just never will.
Yeah.
Oh, ever.
Yeah, it's impossible.
And so we're constantly making changes and modifications and so forth based on what we see from the previous year. And that will never change. But I think that's what drives us. And that's what we do is really difficult with a bow anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think the drive factor there, Greg, is really what, you know, we talk about this link between successful in business, successful in life, successful in hunting. Like, those three things, I think we believe very much are all in tune to each other, right? And so when you talk about like what drives us, well, there's a goal of being successful in the fall that starts with today because the season's over. And it's like everything that we do through is getting to the goal. And when that goal maybe even gets accomplished, it starts right back all over again.
That's right. You know, people say, well, I have dreams. Well, dreams is not a good word. I never have dreams. I have goals, because dreams is unattainable. Goals attainable with a plan. So I never talk in those words. It's always about a goal. And we reset the goal every single year.
Yeah. It's a hard discussion to have. Like, we find ourselves, you know, even with people listening to this, there'll be a large core of people that like, they get exactly what we're talking about because it's how their brain works. There'll be another group that are like, they're just not following because the season's over. Like, they won't think about it again until they pick up their bow in July or August to start shooting again, you know, for the season. And it's not a knock on them, but a lot of times, like, it's public land guys. Like, sure, you can go out and find sheds and you can be scouting in the off season, but, you know, they're not necessarily doing a lot of the habitat stuff that we're doing and the strategy around it. They don't have the opportunity to manipulate those types of things.
I mean, anybody who aspires to kill big deer or to like just participate in that lifestyle, regardless of, I mean, the public-private thing is just like, that's cards that are drawn. It's just what you have access to. I mean, anybody can see that. Like, the hard part is like having access to, you know, where these types of animals live, you know, I mean, and
find them
for better or worse. Like, you know, as time goes on here, those places they're going fewer and fewer, right? Yeah. And so it's like, if you aspire to continue to do that, like, you have to be a better person. You have to make more money to be able to, you know, and so it's like, it really does translate to all aspects of life. And I mean, that's, and it's different. It seems like than it was 5-10 years ago. It's like, there was a time where it's like, it was fine. Like, you could just like on your leases, or Greg, you can probably speak better to this than I can, but like, because of the technology that's in hunting, because of like the scarcity of land that's there, it's like way more impressive, like the entrepreneurial skills and business and like networking ability. Like, that's what kills big deer anymore. It seems more so than the actual hunting skill.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to what you're saying, good and bad to all of it. You know, I went through the lease early on, and I built the property up. I had a great lease, built it up, made it better. 3 years later, nobody in the family had interest in hunting. Grandson comes along, sees me tipping over some decent deer, and Grandpa says, "You're out." And when that day happened, I was driving home and I go, I'm done, because I split a whole bunch of sweat equity into this farm.
Right.
And to have it pulled underneath me, I'm like, lesson learned. I'm not going to duplicate a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what motivated me to start trying to find my own dirt. And that was the beginning of that pursuit, basically. But you're right. Access to hunting ground is becoming more and more difficult for all the reasons you listed. And I mean, we talked about your Iowa experience, right? I mean, that's purely a network, purely.
Yeah.
Nothing more, nothing less than that. And but you made it happen, right?
Sure.
Shit doesn't happen. You make stuff happen.
Yeah.
And you made that happen. The two of you guys did.
Mm-hmm.
How? I don't know, but that didn't happen because you were just sitting around.
Right.
You figured something out. And I think most people don't understand that side of anything, whatever they're doing. You got to make it happen.
Well, it's just like business. I mean, most of us that have our own businesses and stuff, like it's a networking thing to get different things to fall into place and different opportunities to succeed at them. And so, yeah, you're just, in a weird way, you just look at it in the same breath. You're like, okay, I don't have this resource. These people do. Maybe if I can provide something to them in return, I might have access to that resource. And you just start figuring out how to make that happen. Or in some cases, it's just, if you're a good person and you really care about what you're talking about and who it is, like some people are blessed to have a lot of the resource and let you use it.
I think it's like, it's so, it's like, it can just slip. It's hard to put this into words too. I've tried, but it's like, it's so, it could just as easily like not happen. You know what I mean? It's so easy for things to not happen and to not fall in place.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that get them done seeming like they seem insignificant. It really just is like proactivity. You know what I mean? I look at, just because we talked about it, that buck that I killed on Josh's place there, it's like that. It's way more likely that would never have happened, and the only reason that it did happen is because we were proactive enough to like have those conversations, and they were rooted from other proactivity, like just filming our conversation and putting it on YouTube. And like, it's a weird, very not straight path to like how that all comes together.
Yeah.
And so
there's a weird reward from that too. Like in the way that it was accomplished, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah, definitely.
You
can look back on it and be like, look how cool that was. Look at how we did that. But I never could have planned it that way.
Right. Yeah. Neither of us would have thought that, 6 years ago when we started putting in for points, like that's how this would play out.
Sure. So I don't know. Yeah. I guess I'm trying to spur some like, proactivity, like to fire people up to do that. That is the hard part, because it's so easy to just sit at home and be lazy or think that like, oh, well, it's I don't have that, or it's I don't do it. But it's so yes, because you're not doing it. You're not taking the steps, big or small, to make things happen.
It's very true. I mean, I think you guys really are very passionate what you do, and I think Josh recognized that, and Josh gravitates to people that have passion for bow hunting, and he is just guilty as all of us of having a very small network of people. And anybody who's passionate about it and he likes to involve them, because he loves seeing other people be successful. And I know he enjoyed, your success just as much as you did. And that's just Josh. That's just who he is. He's an incredible human.
Mm-hmm.
He really is.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it, just like the look of Josh gets a lot of stereotyping immediately. And
he does.
And even his mannerisms in his video, like, and we probably, prior to like actually having conversations, and really was like our 4-6 hour podcast with him, was like by the end of it, we're like this dude isn't faking it. Like this is actually like who he is.
Mm-hmm.
But most people just, unfortunately, a lot of people just they're not willing to give that time to truly understand how someone is or who someone is.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just,
Yeah, and I think some of that is most people can't relate. And
Sure.
I say this, I don't have any hobbies. I don't really do much.
Same.
No, I'm being honest.
Same.
I mean,
Yeah.
every dollar I spend, it took me forever to buy the first farm, and I didn't go out and drink beer. And do all those type of things because I want to save money, because I had goals. And when you're driven and you have stuff you want to get done, you're working on it all the time, after work, evenings, weekends, and so forth. And Josh is no different. And we got to be friends, and he's like, you're just as nut as I am. His last 200, it was me and him skinning it in his garage. He called me up and said, you in town? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you got time? I'm like, sure, I'll buzz up. So we spent the evening gutting it out and having fun and that old type of thing. And it's just passionate people, being around passionate people that are nuts. Yeah. And we're certified nuts. But there's not that many people out there, and there's a small, Ben, you have a lot of them on your podcast that are really over the top. The guys that are really over the top, to spend the time and energy in doing what they're doing. Skip's another example. I know you had him on the other day. Mm-hmm. He's very passionate about it. He's down in my neck of the woods. We talk quite a bit, and it's guys that really put the time and effort into it. They seem to be successful. And I think it's just because of time. Yeah. I think it's nothing more. It's not a secret. It's just, what do you want out of life, and what do you want to do with your time? Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a secret recipe.
So, Greg, when you were kind of having that goal in mind of like, I want to own dirt, you were looking at that kind of radius. At any point in that first purchase, was it, what kind of deer does this have, or what can I do with it? Like, I know, and I say that because like I know for myself, in a naive standpoint, like the first goal was like buy a piece of property, and naively I was like, if I have this, I can make it amazing. I can make it have big deer. And that's far from the truth now, understanding the dynamics of everything.
Yeah, it comes back to neighborhoods. Every state has its pocket of great deer. I know you guys are in PA, and I'm sure there's better pockets in PA than others. No different than Illinois. There's great spots in Illinois versus others. And you just got to figure out where those pockets are and spend your time and research, and then dive into the neighborhood. Who is your neighbor? Take the time and energy to figure out who they is, what's their philosophies, get on the same page. I got a small little place here in Wisconsin that's predominantly tillable, and I let a 165-ish 4-year-old walk at 25 yards towards just a few days ago at the end of the season. And the neighbor said, hey, sent me the pic. We're going to let him go. And I said, if you let him go, I'll let him go. So we did. That would have been my second largest ever in the state of Wisconsin. And I had him dead to rights, but it's a 4-year-old. And I know you guys are talking about, once you hunted Iowa, it changed your whole philosophy of what big deer is and aging and all that. And once you do have those experiences, it changes you forever. It's a bad thing and a good thing. But it just, going back to your question, it was just a lot of homework, a lot of trips down there, and walking a lot of dirt, figuring it all out, and trial and error, really. And just networking. Just because it's a farm in Iowa doesn't mean it's a good whitetail farm.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt.
What can we say, man? Another year back with Hoyt. We're both shooting RX8s. I'm shooting 70 pounds in the bourbon, which I love bourbon.
That's great.
And you're shooting 80 pounds in the straight black.
Blacked out as always, man. I got so I'm shooting the 500 grain Easton Arrow this year. And at 80 pounds, I'm flinging that thing at like 300 feet per second. I mean, it's deadly. Put a water buffalo in front of me and he's done.
I mean, we shot it earlier. You literally put an arrow through a brand new target, like never been shot before.
I know. So one other thing that Hoyt is doing this year is they're making all their own strings in-house. And so the quality is top notch, and it just really is something that is setting them apart from their competitors.
Well, what we always try to do when we go to our bow shop, Ultimate Outdoors, is we try to shoot other bows just to make sure that we are really giving everybody a fair chance.
Sure.
The reality is it's a no-brainer. Hoyt, it stands above all of them every single time.
Definitely. And so right now you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, for 20% off any apparel on the Hoyt website. And as always,
get serious, get Hoyt.
We can, delicately broach this conversation because there's obviously we're all still, everybody's still looking for farms and big deer and stuff. So I don't expose any tactics here or whatever, but what is it seems like the hardest part is where our farm's at in Illinois. I felt like we found a good pocket, generally speaking. Yep. It's like, hey, there seems like per the realtor that we work with, per the person that referred us, to go over there, that, hey, generally it's a good area. And so we bought the farm and it looked great and I felt like it had potential. But still, we find out, hey, there's, our neighbors are not passing. You know, it's not that situation. You know what I mean? Our neighbors will shoot the first 3-year-old 150 that runs out there, and that's great. You know, that's, you know, I'm not trying to like put say that that's the wrong thing, but like for what we're looking for, I've seen the neighbors is the main thing, the mentality to be able to do that. How do you do that? I mean, how do you, short of going and knocking on their door, and
which is depending on the piece of property, depending on when you're looking, get it under contract, get yourself a week to 10 days of due diligence to walk the property. And doing so, the first thing I do is I lay out a ton of cameras, right? Get the permission to go lay out cameras. If they allow you to throw corn on the ground, great. If they don't, then they don't. Find the scrapes, find the rubs, find the trails, and line up. You'll have an inventory within a handful of days and go, I want to move forward or I don't. If you don't, exit the contract. You know, and while all those cameras are working, start calling the neighborhood and ask for that information and figure out what they say. The problem is they may not know it's for sale, so you may become your worst enemy.
Right.
But you can learn a lot on X and plot maps and all kinds of different stuff. Driving around, you know, what time is what if it's late season and somebody's got corn or beans out, go hit on this hillside and get some binocs and look and see what's in the area. What kind of deer are really in the area? What are you really going to chase?
Yeah.
There's ways around this. You just got to put a lot of time in to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if someone will let you go, one piece I was looking at, he knew the neighbor, and I said, hey, would it be possible if you asked him for me to go sit in a blind at Old Dark 30 just the last hour in late season just to see what kind of deer is out there? And he goes, I don't think he would care. Sure. Got my binocs, went over the hill, jumped in the blind, sat there for the last hour. And I'm like, if he's got deer like this here, I don't know why I couldn't have deer over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just different ways of doing it. Just got to get creative. And all people are going to tell you is no, right?
Right.
They know, they say no.
Well, that seems like, even as many times as you can say, like, what's worse is going to happen is they say no, is just people have a real inept fear for rejection. It to the point of, like, we talked about the networking and stuff. Like, I'm not saying, you know, obviously we didn't go right to a Josh Bomar and say, hey, Josh, can we hunt your farm? Like, that wasn't the style of it. But, you know, at some point you build a dynamic enough as a network and as a relationship to where, you know, you should be able to bring a request or something like that up with comfortability. And I mean, if they say no, they say no. And it's like it's a weird line, you know, and I don't know if it's just from the business side that, like, we get told no all the time and we're like, okay, yeah, you know, let me figure out a different way of doing it.
Well, that's a big one, though. Like, just because you and I take it so we know how. Greg was like busting my balls. He's like, you don't understand what Josh did for you. I was like,
sure.
I think more than anybody. You know, it's like it's like if somebody's going to offer for me to come hunt their place, and I know it's a good place, I'm like, it's really hard for us to accept that offer because we know
how valuable
how hard it would be for us to extend that offer. So it's like, I would way rather be rejected in business or something like,
sure,
you know, than to go to a friend and be like, can I hunt your place? And he's like, no, dude. Like, it's a high stakes thing. You know?
Well, but we have that discussion. Like, it's not like, for how long, I've never hunted your farm, you know, and I'm sure I could be like, hey, Jared, can I come hunt your farm? And I wouldn't want to put you in that position. Like, that's what I'm saying. There's that understanding of the dynamic.
Well, let's put him in that position. Let's ask him.
He doesn't have any deer for me to kill anyways.
Well, that's the problem. And Jeremy and I have the relationship that the answer is obviously yes. Like, it's like, it is, but there's other people involved, and you know the quality that's there. It's like, you can, you know, but it's like, we should look for something better together. And so we did. That's why we went and bought the Illinois farm.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like, you know, I don't ask to hunt your farms. I'm sure you would say yes.
I would.
But I don't want to take that away from your kids I'm like, but there's other people more deserving.
Again, I think it's also the understanding, because we're so ate up with this, that we're like, if I brought you, like, if I took you down to Kentucky, where for the last 2 years you've been hearing me say, like, hey, there's just not a lot of deer. There's just not like the first doe that comes in front of you, you're not going to shoot, because I'm like, there's no deer here. Like, I don't shoot does. Like, there's that understanding and that trust of conversation.
You mean that one?
Yeah, that one? It's dead. You know, and so but it's a weird line, because it is that trust and understanding. And frankly, you know, even for Josh knowing us as well, or as not as well as, you know, you could, he had a lot of trust in you going out to that farm.
Yeah, sure. Well, and we kind of deviated here a little bit, but what that does from a relationship dynamic is while we don't ask each other to hunt each other's farms type of a thing, we are looking for every opportunity to buy land and to hunt together now. Because we say, hey, our goals, our values have aligned. We need to find a way to do more of this together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, another thing is if you guys are really, really interested, I talk to real estate agents, I wouldn't say daily, but it's several times a week. And I've just gotten to know them over 2 decades, and it's just a free flow of information. Most of all the stuff I've ever bought never hit a website.
Yeah.
Well, we're always looking, Greg. I think we told you that. So we bought this farm in Illinois. That's our first purchase together.
Yep.
And we like it a lot. It really has. It seems like a lot of potential. There's been a few heartbreaks along the way, like neighbors shot up and coming deer and stuff. And so,
which can happen anywhere.
We're 2 years in, and we've done a lot of work on the place, and it's been all positive. So we have some options at our disposal here, but like anywhere, we're always looking to expand, to improve. So
and you should, because there always is someone better.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so when we connect with guys like you, Greg, if you're like, hey, my neighboring or whatever, we're looking to be in a neighborhood with good people.
Yeah. I mean, that's been the hard part is like, if that farm is like, hey, we want to sell this and it from an investment side, it makes sense. It's like, what do we roll it into? Because if I look at the open market, there isn't much good on it.
Yeah.
Well, the good ones never hit the websites, is what I'm saying. So that's why you got to create your network. Say, hey, I'm looking for this many acres at this, no more than this dollar amount. If anything comes up in this area, put me on a short list. I can move very quickly. Yeah. That's the people they want to work with, right?
Sure.
And so you go on a page, and when something comes up that fits your category, they might call you.
Yeah.
I mean, I just got a call last night on a piece. I don't have interest in it, but the fact that he called me, I appreciated it. And I call them all the time. Just, hey, how's things going? And it may not even about a piece of property, just to rekindle a relationship.
Yeah,
I want to be short on their list.
It also makes their job a hell of a lot easier if they have a good one. To be able not only to potentially get the listing, because Jared and I are real estate agents in here in Pennsylvania. I mean, the easiest way to get a listing is to say, hey, I think I've got buyers for your place. Like right away, they're like, okay, like these guys sound good.
Well, it's funny because like we know a lot of real estate agents too, and it's like, and several of our friends, however we came to know them or whatever. But it's like, so they're listing properties in areas that we look and stuff, and it's like something they tell us. So it's funny to just like read between the lines of like, sometimes we know what the property is, they know what we're looking for, type of thing, and so it's interesting. We bought some go to market.
That Illinois farm was technically off market when we bought it.
Yeah, it was.
So
it may take you guys years. It took me a long time. It just didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
It's just constantly going after it and calling people and driving around and looking. And sometimes things are not. I've bought some farms that weren't for sale.
Yeah.
And I just called them and said, hey, what'd you sell? Well, I don't know. What do you think? And before you know it, ink is dry and we're going to closing.
Honestly, we talk about that a lot, just whether it's neighbors or reaching out to people or whatever, but that it just becomes, because of the amount of information that's just out there at our fingertips now, it's really hard to find a good farm that, somebody's willing to part with. It's like, if the three of us are thinking about like, a dream whitetail farm, it's like, why would I ever sell this thing? There are life events that happen that unfortunately force people into those situations. But barring that, it's like, if you've got the farm, it's like, that's the end goal, right?
Well, I think it's the on-market stuff. That is a very small number compared to properties that exist.
Right.
And there's lots of properties out there that I think are, there's lots of guys, not deer hunters, that just own. It's not like it's my primary residence. They're just like, hey, I own. Yeah, there's this farm down here we bought. Or
it's investments.
Inherited that one from the uncle or whatever. But the hard part is, it's like it's a data overlap. It's like, how do you overlap off-market properties in areas that we can, through our own research, find are good, and cross-analyze that with areas that we are good pockets based off our relationships there. It's like, to get those two to overlap is, I think, the challenge.
Well, I'm sure you guys have read this, but the largest transaction of land is going to happen in the next 10 years because of the baby boomers.
Yeah.
So between now and the next 10 years, you're going to see more and more land going up for sale because the next generation doesn't want it, or they need to cash out and be done with it. So you're going to see a lot of stuff changing hands in the next decade or so.
Do you think that's going to continue to drive land prices up?
I think it all depends on the interest rate, and it all depends on how much does flood the market in that area.
Yeah.
You know,
is the supply there?
It's a supply thing.
Yeah.
So it just all depends on how that all ravels out. But there's been some farms. I mean, I wish I would have known you guys just a little, 6 months ago. I would have turned you on a farm that wasn't listed, that once the word got out, it was gone in days.
Yeah.
And I hear about those, once in a while.
Well, that's all right. Yeah, keep us in mind.
They exist, man. Sure. That if anything, that's the encouraging thing, not just for us, but anyone like listening is like, those farms exist and they're great. And if you can get yourself into one, like, situations could change, but at least for a foreseeable future, you're in a pretty good spot.
Well, expectations are important too. Greg laughed at me when I told him what we were looking at. And in hindsight, understandably, we're like, well, it's not that big of a request. We just want to kill 5-year-old Boone and Crockett deer, 2 of them every year.
Every year. I mean, it's not that hard, is it? Like they're out there.
Yeah.
Can we just put them on one property? That's just what we're looking for.
Yeah. And so to look at our, like Illinois, the property that we bought, I'm like, it's comical to me that we're not complaining, but the fact that we're like, we would consider selling that. Meanwhile, it's got 160s on it right now, 5-year-old deer and, deer with a lot of potential and stuff. So we have to keep it in perspective too, but.
Sure.
Well, if you got that, I don't know why you want to sell it, because next year they should be over Boone.
Maybe.
Well, we haven't sold it yet. So I guess that's where we're sitting right now.
They also have to stay. We, at least in our 2-year sample size, which is not very big, we've seen almost 80% buck turnover each year, which is just odd.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not anything that either of us have ever experienced on any of our farms. Like,
that's insane.
Thinking crop rotation, but now not so sure. Like it just
here's an example. Not a giant, but this is probably a 4-year-old, whatever, mid 40s 8-point, just a very regular deer. So this was not this past year, but the year before, and I'm like, boy, that deer's like clockwork. He lives on the farm. He's coming up out of this thing. There was a shed we didn't look for. It just drove over it practically.
Yeah, almost ran it over.
Nowhere to be found this year.
Yeah,
nowhere to be found. I think we got a picture or 2 of him early on, like September, maybe one over the summer. We're like, I'm pretty sure that's that deer, and then nothing. Just never through.
Do you just by chance, just so I understand it better, do you by chance have 1 or 2 bucks that are crazy aggressive?
We shot them.
Yeah, we killed them. We killed 3. We killed 2 5-year-olds and a 6-year-old, all under 140 2 years ago. That was the first thing we did. Yeah, they were bully bucks.
We assume so.
They had the attitude for it. They had the look for it. And so after that, like, again, all of these bucks that we'd seen, that was in bow season. So all those bucks that we'd seen made it through. We found several sheds. And then this year, it's usually mid-October when we see them show back up. And we had more bucks in the summer this year than we had the previous year. But
so when are you losing them? When are they disappearing?
From between seasons.
From year, like now. From now to July.
Okay, so that tells me you don't have enough winter food.
Well, the first year, you're right, we didn't have any because we closed on it and it was too late.
Yeah,
we got what we could on there. This year, right now we have standing beans and standing corn and plenty of everything.
Is it still there? I mean, is it gone?
No, there's plenty of it.
Yeah.
Huh. Do you have enough woody browse, enough cover?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Well, we've got, of the 140, it's how much of it is timbered?
About
60 acres of it.
Mm-hmm.
2/3 of that is tornadoes gone through there. And I mean, it's gnarly looking timber and stuff. We haven't cut it hard or anything, and then the remainder of it is CRP that we've worked on improving over the past 2 years.
Crops.
And then the crops that we put in, 10 acres or so.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really, so I guess in particular, great example is we've got a deer that last year we would assumed he was at least 6, but could have been older last year. Not Crazy Horse.
Crazy Horse.
Yep. And it showed up in November, I believe, last year.
Yep.
And had a messed up side, but, just big old monarch-looking buck.
All over the farm.
All over the farm.
Running it.
Yeah, daylight, dark. I mean, just everywhere through the entire season. In fact, we were looking for his sheds. And start of this season, in September, he shows up early. He's there all September. He's there.
Like, there he is.
All
Man.
of October, doing the same.
His one side, he was all jacked up last year from, I assume, a pedicle injury. And this year, he was just clean.
Clean 11 point. Yeah.
Mid-60s, big old bull.
And then mid-October, disappears. Like, just gone. No idea. I mean, no sign of him on whatever, 6 or 7 cameras. Just, he isn't there.
He's just not on the cameras like you'd think.
First week of November, Jared sees him from the stand in the middle of our property, and even with that sighting, still never got another picture of that deer. Like, just, I don't know.
Like, kind of baffling. Like, I'm
80% is baffling to me. If you said 50%, I'm like, okay,
it's crazy.
That's
man.
not out of reasonability, but 80%, 8 out of 10.
I mean,
that's a big number. That tells me something's not there year round,
including that crazy horse deer.
We're working on a small data pool too. I mean, it's 2 years. It's year to year, so
including that crazy horse deer. We had a 5-year-old 9-point this year that we recognized from last year.
I think he's the only one, right? Is he the only one that we know year to year?
And that's it.
In that age class. Yeah, maybe there's some younger deer.
Yeah, but at least from like a 4-plus-year-old age class. And I mean, last year we had 8 or 9 bucks that should have been 4 or older that made it through the season. None of them showed back up.
What's your buck to doe ratio?
Seemingly not
pretty
that
close.
Bad. Not that bad. Like 2 to 1, maybe.
Maybe.
Oh wow, that's impressive.
I mean, we have an 1/8 to quarter-acre clover plot, and again, there's been no snow in West Central Illinois like at all this year. We have this little clover plot. The other day, I counted over 13 bucks in that little clover plot. And a bunch of 3 and 4-year-olds.
There's not like a ton of deer, Greg. Like on the whole place there on any given time, we'd guess like 30 to 40 deer.
Mm-hmm.
But the turnover, like I said, I was really worried when we got into November that EHD like probably hurt a bunch of our deer. I mean, we had a really shitty 5.5-plus-year-old that we called G4 last year that we tried to kill. He was the last one on the list.
Another one rolling the farm last year.
Yeah, we should have killed this deer, and he made it through. Like, he was there in February, and they dropped late February.
Never saw him.
Gone.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. We can take it offline, but I'm willing to bet that there's something there that they're leaving for. Mm-hmm. Is that woody browse? Is that just general cover? Is the land laid out enough that regardless of wind direction, when they get up to reposition, do you have enough cover in all 4 wind directions that they can bed back down and feel comfortable?
It's good terrain for that.
Without seeing that,
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that we are in a main creek feeder in that area, Spoon River, which is like the river corridor in that area. And we're surrounded by thousands of acres of just open ag. I mean, could it be a factor of crop rotation from beans the first year to corn this year, like that it changed it that much?
Could be. I mean, I find that interesting. I don't know why it would, but
I mean, this year should be a good example, right? Like, I mean, this year coming up, 25 will be like, now we've got a repeat of crop rotations. Like, do we see some of these deer show back up? I guess I say that because there are some neighbors that we're not completely connected with, but there are some that we are very connected with. In fact, the guy across the street who owns 160 acres was sharing a pile of pictures with Jared, and I'm like, I don't know any of these deer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like
any of them?
None of them. It literally is a big ag field.
So then you got to look at yourself and go, okay, there's a land transition, a barrier, something that's not allowing them to go back and forth. What is that? I don't know.
It's a road and an open field.
That's it. Really.
It's wild, man.
This is a challenge. I'd love to see the aerial on this and just pick it apart and just pick your guys' brain, because I think it'd be fun. This is the part that's so much fun about the whitetail
sure.
stuff.
Well, and like I said, we have not experienced anything like this on 5 other farms that we have ownership of.
Here's my perception. If I had to guess, you say, hey, here's the final exam. Just tell us what you think happened. I think that summer, not that it's a rotation as much as like those deer just seem okay to be picked up by the crop rotation over the summer and dropped off in another timber lot.
Yeah.
And that's where they live this year. Like wherever they happen to end up with, wherever they broke up from their bachelors or whatever. And when they live there, it's in a very small area. At least this past year. I don't know if that had to do with whatever the natural browse situation was.
We were dry out
dispersal
there.
from EHD. I don't know why. But I think that crazy horse deer was on us a lot. I just don't think he ever left like a 10-acre sanctuary.
Yeah.
Well, if you're getting him on picture, 2 times a week, he's probably there almost every day.
I mean, we didn't get him at all.
Like it stopped. Like I don't.
Mid October, we never got another picture of that deer, but we hunted it once and we saw him. Like. That's what it's just like. And again, this is a deer that...
It'll drive you crazy because you're like, does he know the cameras are there?
We would get 5 pictures a day of that deer from November through February last year. Like just everywhere. And he kind of is occupied... Where we saw him is in a very similar area to that. He just... I don't know.
This farm, Greg, is just like when they get picture, when they move, you get them. Like they go through all the sets.
Every camera.
They go through all the sets. Like the one deer that I was hunting out there, I saw him bedded down with a doe. It was I just saw him, and the one day that he got up and walked the farm, he went through all the sets, and I saw him in person. The doe that he was with busted me, and it didn't work out. But it's just like there's nowhere for him to go. You know what I mean? That's what kind of makes it easy to hunt in one capacity, but also
they're following just the corridors. Like it's a bunch of CRP, open field, crops, and then they just follow the creek corridors and stuff. That's all they do, and drainages.
Well, we think for the most part.
I mean, that's how they get through our sets.
Yeah. When they walk through the sets, that's what they do. Well,
interesting.
Yeah, we'll share the map with you. I'll be interested to get your perspective,
but I mean, those are the things that, and again, small sample set, right? 2 years. Honestly, I'm probably more excited.
Me too.
For this year than I was last year, just of like the not knowing, right? And we do have a couple really good bucks that will be
may or may not be there.
Yeah, may or may not be there next year, but it's just a different type of place. And then we talk to people. Right across the street. And I mean, they've got multiple 5-year-old plus deer that I'm like, I don't know that, like, why did the deer not cross the road? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. They have something that you don't, and I don't know what that is, but I think it's that simple, guys.
Yeah.
Well, and vice versa, because they're not seeing our deer either.
Yeah. They don't have either of the 160s that we were hunting.
But I mean, every deer has their limits, right?
Sure.
I mean, I watched one deer this fall come off our hillside, walked up, and I didn't know his pattern, but I watched him for 2 or 3 days in a row, and I'm like, he never leaves this now. I thought he was going somewhere else.
Yeah.
But his core area was probably, I don't know, they call it 200 acres maybe.
Yeah.
180. And he was just going back and forth. And I thought when he went to the north, I thought he was gone. He just never hit another camera. And so it's really, you can never substitute ass in seat.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yep.
The more you observe, the more you learn. Cameras will tell you a lot, yes, but they don't tell you everything.
Yeah.
And that's why sitting in blinds and sitting on hillsides and all that type of stuff, that's when you really learn.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when you start, like, that farm is probably a better example than even like our home, what I would consider our home farms. And like, we're not there very often. Right. And the old farmer is 89 years old. He basically mows the grass and like, he doesn't leave his yard. So like that farm is very it's non-disturbed. And I wonder when you start to look at, especially in these ag fragmented areas, is like, we know what the core area might look like. Maybe it is 100, 150, but like the core of the core, like where this deer is spending probably 80+% of his time, particularly in the daylight hours, I have to imagine is like squeezed down to like 20 acres in some cases. Just because
you're probably right.
If you laid 200 acres over like a portion of like our northeast corner of our farm, you basically have our woodlot, open field, and like maybe a small drainage ditch. Like there isn't anything within 200 acres.
Well, my guess is they're probably living in the beans and the corn. They're probably not coming out.
Yeah.
Because the more I learn, it doesn't sound like you have a whole lot of cover and true habitat. So, and it's predominantly ag from what I piece together. They're probably living in the corns and the beans. And they're not hitting your camera. Well, you may not be losing them as much as you think. You're just not seeing as much as you are because they're not coming out. Until it's harvested.
I think we definitely aren't seeing the deer as much as like they're around. The other thing, and I don't know, again, we didn't have a lot of ass and seat time there, is like the first year we bought it because of the CRP contract, they mowed 35 plus acres of CRP. And then this year it was
I shed a single tear on that one.
Yeah. This year it was 7.5 feet tall. Right. And I'm not saying that they're just out there laying in there because it's, CRP, but it definitely provided a lot more insulation, even in just the small like creek corridor woodlands.
There's way
and
more cover on the
areas
farm this year than there was last year.
Yeah, almost to the point where I'm like, it was a disadvantage from a hunting side this year. Like they were so visible. We sat 6 times and we killed 3 mature bucks 2 years ago.
Yeah.
This year, Jared and I both sat for 4, 5, 6 days, and neither of us had a mature buck in range.
Have you ever guys thought about mowing trails in the CRP to take them to your thoroughways
to our
layer?
Yes, we have. We've done some of that.
Okay.
And it does work.
Okay. It's worked, in varying degrees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But
they're lazy. They like to mow past instead of going through that tall grass.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just an interesting it's the trying to learn, because we're guys that, especially when we're looking at these deer that are moving through the 3, 4, 5+ year old age class, we're very much married to, okay, this is the deer, this is what he did last year. And like so far we haven't had that capability on that farm. Like the deer from last year weren't there this year, may not be there next year. And so it's hard to attach like this 11 point, you came close on them, but I don't know that deer from last year. Mm-mm. And so there was literally no on like, what's he going to do this year? Because we didn't know him, and he was there most of the year on our farm.
Well, I guess here's the question. How many years does it take to learn a farm, Greg?
Yeah, that's a good one.
A lot more than you realize. To truly understand a farm, I think you're looking at 4 to 5 years. I've had a farm almost 2 decades, and believe it or not, I'm still making adjustments. And the reason why I'm continuing making adjustments is because Mother Nature's always winning. Mm-hmm. She's always changing the landscape every single year. If you think you got a thoroughway, all of a sudden something grows up and gets thicker and bushier, and you don't realize it, and all of a sudden the deer traffic move. You got to dive in during shed season and go, why did this change? And so and I think that's the part that attracts us all, because we're crazy in this aspect, is you're never going to get it dialed in the way you want it to be. And I think that's what's so interesting about this sport, is it just takes so much time and energy to really reassess this stuff, to understand how it's always changing. And I learned more. We probably spend, God, my wife probably knows more than I do. I bet you it's easy 45 to almost 60 sets a day or a year in the Whitetail woods. And so we're, and we did, I think 7 or 8 all-day sits in that number. Mm-hmm. And that's when you really learn. Trail cameras are one thing, but man, and if you're just going to go sit in your tree stand or box blind, whatever that set of choice is. Yes, I look at my phone, but my binocs are always out. I'm always scanning, always looking, and I'm trying to learn the corridor, why, when they're coming, what time they're coming, what time they're leaving, what's the wind direction, why they're leaving here, why they're coming in from this side. And I make notes.
Yeah.
We make adjustments every single year. It never stops.
Well, let me spin that question on you. How long do you give a farm? Like if you buy a farm, how long?
I would say 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4
years. Yeah. If you're not happy in 3 to 4, I would tell you, because, you guys are now chasing this age thing. I think I've learned that now, that age is more important than score, which is where you want to be. And, if you have a 3-year-old, well, in the current year, it's going to take them 3 years to get to 6. Mm. So if you're not getting your return in 3, if not 4 years, then it's time to move on, because going 6 and 7 is not going to change. And I learned that the hard way. I kept farms too long.
You did.
So I would say I did. Yeah, I have. I would say if you're not happy by end of year 4, I would say it's time to move.
Interesting. Because that's the one spot that I would say we're not in. Like, we own farms. I've never sold one. Like, and there's a weird emotional side to it. It's like, I bought land, I own land, like comfortable to a point as well. But there's also questions that start to arise. And, one, it's trying to be patient, but the other one is like, is this ever even going to meet my expectations, which, is can I hunt mature deer on this thing?
All right, so here's the third middle question. Can it become the farm that you want? Like, is there a level of input in it that
it can be? It can be. I'll give you an example. I bought a farm. Now this is Iowa, to be full transparent. I'll tell you 2 stories.
Asterisks.
One in Iowa that the guy couldn't shoot anything. His goals was Boone and Crockett, and he was always shooting mid-50s and mid-60s. That was just kind of what the farm gave him. And I said, hey, if you ever want to sell it, I'm interested. I couldn't understand why that was the dilemma. I mean, he called me and said, hey, I'm going to sell it. So I said, okay. And this was like in late January, February. And I said, I want to walk. He said, have at it. So I went and I spent the day with boots on the ground, walked every part of this thing. And there's no food. There's no woody browse. The cover was not what I thought it would be. So he's losing a large sum of his deer.
Yep.
And so every year he's doing a reset. And so I took the flyer and I said, okay, I love the access. It had every wind direction possible. And I'm like, if I curate everything that I want to curate, what will happen? Well, that now has become my forever farm.
Wow.
I mean, I'm not going to sell it.
Yeah.
So what happens to it when I leave, I don't know, but I know I'm not selling it.
Wow.
And I didn't think that was going to be possible, but we put a crap load of work into it. And we still do today. And then the Missouri farm, I bought it. It was hard for me to find a track of a deer on this farm.
What?
Yes, true story. And there was very little deer density. And now this is where it's going to get really interesting, is I didn't hunt it, set it up, did the cover, did the food, did all that stuff. Didn't hunt it for 3 years, and just let it sit. And in the 4th year, we went in and we started hunting it, and everything had changed. We completely stayed out of it. And now I was thinking about this when you guys were asking me the ATA, and I talked to you guys about the DMAP program.
Yep.
And that was 5 or 6 years ago. So 5 or 6 years ago, that same farm that I just mentioned, we had basically no deer density. Now we have 6 years ago when we started the DMAP, we're, depending on what part of the farm we were, either 10 to 1 or 14 to 1. And that's all done by habitat, water, food, cover, and leave it alone.
Jeez.
How does that ratio get so out of balance? What you'd think, if you go from no deer to just leaving it alone, they're going to be relatively right.
Balance.
Well, I just think the neighborhood was dying for habitat.
Yeah.
And once they found it, they didn't leave. And I was leaving way more food than I needed. From clover, there wasn't a time of the year where they didn't have food. And we always had TSI work done. So we had plenty of woody browse. And so once they don't have a reason to leave, they don't leave. And then some of them drop, 2 fawns, who knows how many some are triplets.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if I'm not hunting, it don't take long to get that ratio out of whack fast. And it gone way over the tilt to, now we shoot a lot of does now. And that's another debatable topic that I talk to.
I mean, I would assume also to contribute to that skewing, like your neighborhood probably had to not shoot does and be hammer and box, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep.
That's wild, man. Well, I mean, it's encouraging, like, and again, asterisk being Iowa, but still, like,
that's Missouri. The one I just told you was Missouri.
So there you go. So, I mean, the fact is like, I think a lot of people, and again, it's just for, it's a finite resource, the number of these amazing farms that exist already that you can get your hands on. So a lot of times it is the development aspect of it, which we all love to do anyways. But, I think the big fear for many of us is this is a huge financial commitment, right? And it is the passion side of things. But ultimately, the last thing you want to do is commit to this thing and then it never accomplish your goal. You know, that's the whole reason you bought it. You know, you want to see it achieve something.
I relate and understand. I mean, I went through 3 farms on the hard way of life of trying to make it work to finally land one. And every single one, I learned something.
Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't a complete loss on that side.
It wasn't a loss. And that's how I just said, okay, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I'm looking different. You know, now when I'm looking for farms, I can look at an area and go, I'm not even interested, or, you know what, the truck's heading that direction. I'll be there tomorrow, or whatever the timeline will be, just by an aerial. Just because I've learned so much over the years that the aerial will tell me a lot of stuff that I'm looking for.
It's interesting, like, as someone who's recently like in the game, as far as like buying farms, it's like, it's a daunting concept. Like the thought of like, oh, I'm going to buy a farm. Like it's for if somebody's never done it before, it's like, it's terrifying, right? To be like,
yeah,
you know, let alone all the things it takes, like, you know, you have to have the cash in the bank to be able to afford a down payment and to go through the process. But the actual process of buying the farm is like, at least our experience was like, it was scary how easy it was. You know, it's just like, hey, sign here. And
I was going to say my fear.
I'm like, that's it. We own it. Like,
my fear in a weird way right now is selling a farm. It's
that's why I kind of brought it up, is I think that could be equally as easy. You'd be like, I sold it.
I also, but I like, a part of me is like, okay, well, what do I buy with it? Right. I don't want to take the capital gains hit. I got to buy something. And then I'm back into that. So like, yeah, part of me is like, that's why I asked the question, like, how long do you give these farms? It's like, you know, especially again on the bit, not to tie it back there, but the business mindset, like, we're not quitters. Right. So like, to your point, Greg, I'm sure that was part of it, is like, you're like, you know, my wife says I'm a bit stubborn in that way, is like, no, I'm just going to keep working at it. Well, and it's going to happen. And just some of these.
But I mean, how much, but okay, here, I'm going to point this story back to you. The most important commodity we have right now, and I don't care where you are in your point of life, is time.
Time. Yeah.
No important. You can't buy more of it.
Right.
And so you can either continue to struggle and have your head beat against the wall in your current farm. And if you give it 3 to 4 years, what's another 3 or 4 going to do if you've already done it 3 or 4 years? You've already gone through the cycle of 3-year-olds getting a 6.
Yep.
Right. So waiting another 2 or 3 years, what's going to change? And that took me a while to figure that out on my first farm. I was very much like you, because I put a ton of sweat equity, and I go, I don't want to lose this.
Yeah.
And then I got a little bit better on the second one. Then I got a little bit better on the third one. And then I finally got really good on the last one.
Yep.
But I think you have to let it go to potentially get better. I think it's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
because if not, you're just going down a rabbit hole that you're never going to come out. It's never going to change.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, you know, concept, because it's the factor is the belief that maybe not something will change, but it's like, you can't just say because, well, one deer died at 3 years old, that they're all going to die at 3 years old. Right. So
but if you give it 3 or 4 years and you're not moving the needle, I don't know. If I'm you, I'm leaving.
Yeah. Well,
and that would have been harder for me to say 20 years ago. I would, no disrespect, but I see myself in you guys 20 years ago.
We know that.
Is what I see.
we know that.
Because the mindset, the whole thing, I was struggling like you were. And that's when I said, I've got to broaden my scope. I was too narrow in where I was looking, got the map, and I said, I got to start looking. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time doing it.
I think the weird part for us now, I'm further into the game than Jared is. But I'm happy I am at this point, because it's like, I would say almost every farm I bought has dramatically increased in value, just because of the timing that I bought them, or in some cases, some of the natural resources from timber and things like that. But now it's like, you know, I look at to what our discussion was earlier, like what's on market, how would I flip it? And it's like, I have to find something off market to take myself to the next level, right? If I sell this and I want to improve, what currently keeps hitting the market isn't going to satisfy the thirst, basically.
Well, but I think what you do is you built that network, right? Wherever you want to go, there's always 1 or 2 real estate guys that dominate the part of the country that you want to go. It seems to be the trend that I've found. Reach out to those guys and say, hey, I'm willing to move, and, you know, this is what I'm looking for. And then, you know, if I were you, I would start calling the neighbors, say, hey, I'm thinking about selling. If I was, would you be interested? And so you've got one or two guys as an option in your pocket to go, hey, I found this piece, you willing to go? And it's move quick.
I think we're still going through the motions too. Like the reason we're not beating your door down to be like, find us a farm, is like there's still a very good chance that it could.
We're in that learning phase.
Yeah. Well, yes.
You got to lick the pole, and it's got to hurt.
Yeah.
Make a change.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
And so we're looking at, we're like, okay, well, the farm deserves at least another year based on what we've seen,
at least one,
the work we've put into it, at least another year. Yeah. And in the meantime, it's kind of, we want to expand. So like we're going to offer on some of our neighbors and stuff that it's off market, not for sale stuff, and we see that as a pivotal piece. We're like, okay, those guys are killing some of the deer. And so that will, whether those doors open or close on us, will be a big part of, when we do decide to,
because if they open, that might be the key that opens up, what has been our limiting factor.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
Well, if you approach them. Don't wait.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's where we're at now.
Yeah. That'll be soon.
Yeah. In other places, it's like, like on my Kentucky farm, I'm in that process, I guess, Greg, where like I've got a deer that will be 6 last year, but he was like the oldest buck, which was a 3-year-old when I bought it. Right. I've got a really good group of 3-year-olds this year that will be 4 next year that were 1-year-olds when I bought it. Right. So I'm a year out here to getting them to 5 to being like, okay. And then that's what Jared and I were talking about earlier today. It's like, then I can look back and what's in the 4-year-old bucket, the 3-year-old bucket, the 2-year-old bucket that's up and coming. Now that you've created this property, each of those is probably looking a lot better than when you bought it.
The problem is our goals are continually increasing, like inflation. So it's like I'm perpetually a year away.
Yeah.
It's like the deer getting a year older.
That will never stop, guys.
I know.
Never. So if you think you're going to get there, you never will.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I mean, obviously you throw the curveball of like an Iowa trip in there and it just completely corrupts the system.
I only kill 5-year-olds now, or 7-year-olds or whatever. Well, Greg, what in those farms, I mean, you bought them and it sounds like they were a long way from your dream farm. I mean, what about them made you believe that they could be awesome farms someday?
I just knew how little they were taken care of. And there's just no love in it. No food, no habitat, no bedding, just no. And I'm like, if you know, 50s and 60s and they're leaving, if I don't give them a reason to leave, they're going to stay. So why can't I figure this out?
Yeah.
And it took 2 or 3 years and it changed. And now, I mean, I've been offered some really dumb money, as my wife says. But she called me an idiot. She goes, "You're a certified idiot."
Yeah.
And I said, "You're right, I am." But I'm at the point in my life now. I don't want to take the time to kind of go duplicate it somewhere else, even though it was a ridiculous number. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Those 50s and 60s deer, like what kind of age class would you say he was killing?
They're all 4s and 5s.
4s and 5s.
They're all 4 and 5-year-olds, But now we're killing, the 8-point that I just killed 3 nights ago, here in Wisconsin, he was 6. So this fall in Iowa, I killed 7, if not 8. And so we're really focusing on, will we kill a 4-year-old? Yeah, if he's got or a 5-year-old, he's got to be really, really special. And it's got to be a unique situation. But more often than not, we're 6, 7, and 8 is what we're chasing now.
Yeah.
And it's because the farm is that mature that we have that many running around.
Wow.
That we can, really focus on.
Yeah.
And that's changed and it takes time. But habitat, my biggest shift as a landowner and a bow hunter is when everything changed for me is when I became a land steward first and a bow hunter second.
Mm-hmm.
And I put more time into correcting the landscape of the land and making it about deer habitat, food, cover, water, the triangle I call it. That's when it changed. It's not about a food plot. It's not about this tree stand. It's about taking the whole and breaking it down into micro segments and going, how can I make this better? And when I did that, that's when things changed.
And when you say micro segments, Greg, are you talking like actually breaking the farm down into different sectors?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
and then making
Yep.
sure that each of those sectors has that triangle accomplished. It goes back
A
to like
sector being like a perceived home range of a herd of deer or a certain buck.
Well, it could be, you know, Tom Ware and I have a lot of theories that, I don't know if you know Tom Ware.
Yep,
He was
I know
a
Tom.
long time jury. I have a lot of respect for Tom. He's a good friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
We believe there's only one mature buck per plot. We call him the king of the plot. You know,
Yep.
they don't put up with much. And so you don't want to have too many plots and too many sources, so you disperse it too much, but you got to have enough, and you got to break down your farm based on food, water, cover, and create those little micro segments that as these deer age, from my experience, they move less.
Yeah.
And they don't want a reason to move unless you give them a reason to move.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes back to food, water, cover, and pressure. And so you can control the pressure to some degree, and you can control the food, water, cover.
Mm-hmm.
And so you take your farm and you break them down in micro segments and make sure they have, you know, the TSI work, the woody browse, the cover. When they shift and the wind changes, do they have enough bedding to make them happy on every wind direction? That was a big part that we had to fix. So you start breaking it down in that many segments, you'll be surprised in a 2 or 3 year period, it'll change. But
how,
it's not a bow hunting mindset. You got to be a landscape guy.
Oh, yeah.
You know, habitat.
We're
guy.
there, dude. We spent the whole last 2 hours of this morning talking about like, and we don't have to delve into like a specific prescription for ours, but I am super curious to hear.
I mean, wait, let me ask on this, and I'm sure, Greg, it depends on the property, right? But I mean, like when you're talking about these breakdowns, like how big are those usually? Are they a range of 5 to 10 acres?
It all depends on your access.
Okay.
Right? Because access is everything. I don't look at a farm unless I know the access.
Yep.
And I buy farms based on access.
Yeah, sure.
Because I'm going to set the farm up based on my access. Like if it's a north wind, east wind, whatever winds we have, then I'm going to set up and put the TSI work, the plot. I'm going to dig a hole for water, all based on my access. So I'm taking the access and I'm building my micro structure around that access, so that I know.
Makes sense.
We try to hunt deer that they don't feel that they're hunted. That is my number one goal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's hard. I know what I'm saying sounds pretty ignorant, but it's true. And if I was to take you to my farm, you're like, man, they don't know you're here, and they don't know you're coming and going.
It's crazy.
We've experienced, like, I think in Illinois, and it's rare to say this on a primarily west access farm is what this is. We do have a right of way in the back door that provides some opportunities, but they're more than anywhere else that I have control over. I mean, I feel like we have done a really nice job with that. We've established our I'll give Brackett the credit where credit's due. I like his red and blue. Chris Brackett has a red and blue paint theory. You know what I mean? Red paint is when you're walking into deer areas, you know, they sense that as you're dripping red paint everywhere. The blue paint is, you know, you're walking in areas where they expect you to be on roads, by the house, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, in between is where you kill them. You're flirting on, you know, the purple or whatever. And he's also pretty firm on like, that's their side. This is my side. They know it. I know it. This is how I come in, and then you meet in the middle type of thing. So we really were intentional about setting up our access. I mean, it's like if you would look at our farm, and I'll show it to you someday. I bet you would look at it and be like, "Yep, that's the best you could do with what you have."
With what you have,
you access the property lines on both sides. You hunt them on the north and southwest winds accordingly, and then the back winds you hunt. You know, and you can do that. And so I felt like we did that well. We could take that and relate that to another farm.
I think
in a good way.
I think the wind direction thought process of like, do they have a place that they feel secure in on all the different winds is one that is probably significantly overlooked by most people. Because most people set up, you know, a bedding or security area in favor of, well, I'm going to hunt here on this wind and they're going to come from this direction. Like, you know, that's how you set it up. And then, but you don't think about what about the times when you're not hunting that because of different winds?
So what degree of consistency can you say he beds here on west winds? He beds here on north winds? Like, do you feel like you have a pretty good track record on that?
I would say so. We have got the farm so dialed in now that I could tell you the corridors, you know, their traffic patterns.
Yep.
Now are they going to be there on that day? I don't know. But if I sit there 3 or 4 days in a row with the right wind and the right weather day,
Yep.
I wouldn't bet against me.
Yeah.
We've killed a lot of deer on the first sets. We've killed a lot of deer in the second and third sets because of the preparation.
Yep.
Opportunity meets preparation. You guys know that.
For
You
sure.
don't kill them in the fall. You kill them in the summer and the spring.
Yep.
And so we identify, 2 or 3 deer that we're going to go after the following fall based on observation and reveal trail picks. And then we basically set the farms up that way and making sure to go into those sections to go, okay, it's been a while since we've been on this part of the farm. Do we need TSI work? Do we not? How's the pond looking? I haven't been over here in a while. What's the food look like? And we put a lot of time into those things, and they just become micro farms inside the farm itself. And since we started doing that is when things changed. People look at most often as the big scope.
Yep.
If it's a 160 or 80, we'll divide it in 4 or 5 sections.
And that's what you're looking at from a micro side? I guess that's my curiosity. If I've got a 160, I mean, am I crazy to think that I could?
I'd break it up in 440s.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Here's a super general question. There's no right answer to it. How many mature bucks can you fit on a piece of property? Pick your size. Say you got a 160.
I think that's an impossible question because I don't know how much cover you have. I don't know how much food. I don't know.
You have unlimited
timber.
Unlimited time and resources to plant whatever you want.
If I had to go pick my ideal farm, I would say it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 40% timber and 60% open, or 35-65 of timber, being 35 to 40%. The reason why is because then I am going to identify the corridors and I'm going to create warm season grasses on the hillsides of where I want them, and then dictate where they're going to move to based on wind directions to my food plot locations.
Yeah. Talk to us about a warm season grass mix, what that looks like, and what locations you're going to choose for them.
Well, I knew I should have had this. I knew it was going to come up. It's in my laptop, and I don't have.
This is what Jeremy and I talked for 3 hours about this morning.
It's blue. It's red rock. There's like 7, and I don't want to get this wrong, but I'll text it to you.
But it's primarily switchgrass.
Yes, it is. But I mean, it goes all up to. All of our stuff is probably 7 feet tall, probably.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we're using a lot more Egyptian wheat. We use a lot of borderline from Big Time is what we're using
for your screening. Mm-hmm.
Yep. We use a ton of that for access to and from. So doing things like that every farm is so different. We've got some heavy wooded lots. We've got open stuff, and it's just creating the need and bringing that bedding area closer to the food source, so they don't have to travel as far. Like our Wisconsin here, it's predominantly ag, and our woodlots are not very big. So every year we go and do TSI work because I don't want them to leave, and I want them to bed right next to me because we're only going to hunt them in late December and January. Our season ends end of the month. Yeah. And so I can't afford them to come 400, 500, 600 yards from the neighbor while they're bedding. It'll be too dark. Mm-hmm. They won't make it. And so we create a lot of bedding really close, depends on the farm, everything's so different. And I've just learned this over the years that it's really hard to give you the magic bullet. It's tough, but I think if you break down your farm in micro segments would be the first place I would start.
Yeah. And if you, I guess just generally, let's just stick on that 160 that we're going to potentially, divide into 440s. I mean, what are you looking within each of those? Like, I need water, whether you create it or not. Yep. Are you talking multiple food plots and a destination source in that?
I definitely would.
Okay. And then obviously cover.
You got it.
Okay.
The cover is the most baffling to us. And I don't mean to spiral down this. I mean, it's like as simple as do they bed in timber or do they bed in warm season? I mean, there's probably not a right answer. and Jeremy and I are on different ends of the spectrum. So not the autism spectrum, although
We might.
there's been an argument. Where I'm at is pasture country, big open timber. It feels like you're fly fishing for these bucks. Like they're just in these little pockets of timber, where they're at. Jeremy is where he's in Kentucky and in Ohio, big woods, opposite end of them.
Yeah, very few openings. If I have openings, I'm creating them, which is costly.
Yep. And I think yours, frankly, to me, is a little bit more straightforward. Like you can do endless chainsaw work. You can read topography. You can dibble bar in cedar stuff.
I lose my deer quick because
you lack food.
I lack food.
Right.
I might have browse, and I mean that's one thing. Like with the browse, they stick, but like I don't have destination food.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I would do is on your destination, on your food plots, if you're going to break down your 160 into separate 40s, I would mow trails or cut trails to connect all 4 of them.
Yep.
So that when they go on a walking path, during the rut, they're going to hit all 4 in one evening, if not 2 or 3. They might not get to all 4, but they're going to get a lot of them.
Yeah.
We found success in that as well. Like we got a couple plots that are probably 300 yards apart, probably, and we mowed some trails to them, and we dictated where we want them to enter and exit. And once we mowed that path, they just walked right through it.
What are you mowing trails through? Like what?
Could be grass. Could be we actually hired a dozer guy to cut through some timber.
Yep.
So it was a no-brain walking path. That's call it as wide as the blade. I don't know what's a blade on a dozer, 6 feet, 7 feet.
6
I
or
don't
7.
know, whatever that is. And it's funny how you can see them coming off the top of the hill, coming down through the timber, across the creek, and back up.
Yeah.
They're lazy. You can dictate this stuff.
Yeah.
And once you show them the way, they will take the way.
Yeah. Interesting. And on the other side of it is my farm, which is open. And I think we talked about this a little bit at ATA. I was like, the perpetual question is, what can I plant here? To
how do you create cover out of nothing?
How do you create the sensation of remoteness?
Yeah.
And or give them the density of cover, or both. Because I can't even get to that point of like show them the path. It's like it's an open pasture. You know what I mean? There's nothing there. There's no habitat there.
Yeah, but if you have grass, you can mow a path through it.
Yeah. And so that's a prime suspect is grass. So that's why I'm curious about the blend and that.
It's what I would do. I'll text you the blend. I have it. I just don't have it in front of me. But we're modifying it constantly based on what I'm learning too. So, but I can give you the current blend. I think it's 7, if not 8 blend, I think.
And those deer are effectively bedding in that?
Yeah, we find a lot of sheds. We don't find them until we burn it.
Yeah,
because it's too thick.
Right.
But yeah, for sure, no doubt.
Interesting. Well, that's debated, right? Some people say, "Yeah, they don't bed and switch. It's too thick." I've heard that.
Well, it depends on your seed count, right? Depends on your soil type, depending on rain. There's a lot of variables. That's what's so tough about this. Just because I'm doing well on this farm doesn't mean it's going to go well on the other farm. We may have to change our seed count because we don't want it too dense. If it's too dense, you're right, they won't bed in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to do what Bomar did on his Illinois farm. I'm pretty sure just like bulldoze a 10-acre field in the middle of it and put a big giant grain field in there.
Yeah, that's exactly. Well, that's what I keep going back. I was going to talk to a guy and see. I was looking at it today. Like I've got a pretty big bottom in my Ohio place that is like several smaller fields. And it's like, I feel like taking out some of those wood lines and just opening it all up to just be one single big grain field in the bottom is probably what's necessary. Because the nice thing is they feel secure in those smaller fields because of the wood lines. The downfall is they just pile in there and just, if I have beans, they mow them.
Well, divide it in corridors. Put some borderline or Egyptian wheat down the middle, or you guys know this. Deer love walking edges.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, get that in there and create your own edge and funnel that edge to where you want to be on your setup.
Yeah,
and it'll change the walking and how they trans through or walk through that transition. Create that transition through the Egyptian wheat. Dictate how they're going to walk.
I know this sounds stupid, and it just because of what it actually. And you're right, Greg. Like I did that in Kentucky, but because for all of my properties have had a lack of opening, I've like an innate fear of like planning that type of screening and cutting up a field when it's like I feel like I have to use every square inch for food. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, it does.
Because I just don't have a lot of openings.
Well, and you may. I mean, it's the reality. Like if you
can always create more though, Jeremy. I mean,
Yeah,
if you want
sure.
to bulldoze
Oh, yeah.
timber lines, you can always create. I know it's expensive, but
yeah, but I
you
mean,
can.
it's just
funny. It's just funny. I'll do it. But no,
But I'm saying there's ways around this. It all depends on how nuts you want to get, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've done it all.
But you hear that a lot, right? I mean, people are like, whether it's an acre or 2 acre field, it's like,
how much have you bulldozed now? How much have you cleared?
Well, just recently
Small
in
plots,
Ohio, I cleared another 6 acres. 4 plots
Oh, wow, that's
total.
a lot.
4 plots total in 6 acres. So
That's a lot.
2 half acres, a 1.5 and a 2.5, basically. That's 4.
Well, you're going on the right path.
Yeah. So,
But
Ohio's
I think
better.
sometimes if you create that wall, they can't see past that wall.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it forces them to move because they can't. Curiosity kills them every single time.
Exactly.
So if you create that wall and you divide it up in maybe two sections, but you create that wall that is in your favor, that edge so happens to be 20 yards from your set or 30 yards from your set. That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And we've learned that over the years is when we get in certain parts of the farm, I can tell you where they're coming from and where they're going to exit and where we're going to kill them.
Yep. Boy, that's been it. Admittedly, it's been a flaw of mine, even in my new Kentucky farm, which was old pasture. So I had open ground. I had 39 acres of open ground on the top, of which most of it is standing beans right now. So it's awesome. But again, it's like it was so hard to hunt, like because I didn't funnel. These deer would walk into a six acre bean field in September on opening weekend in velvet, and they're like, they stayed there for 3 hours. They never.
That's too much.
There was no movement there.
No, you're not going to.
Yeah.
But if you create some edges,
exactly,
and some walls, it's going to force them to move.
HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Pure Wildlife Blends.
Yeah, buddy. We're doing a lot of food plots this year. It seems like the planning, the preparation, like the coordinating for getting everything, in the ground, it's like it just never ends.
Yeah, and I just got off an 18-hour bender where I'm on multiple farms getting everything ready. But this year, fortunately, we've got Pure Wildlife Blends, which is Jeff Sturgis. Who better to partner with for our food plot program than a guy who's got 30 years of experience, been on thousands of farms. I mean, the guy lives and breathes food plots.
Yeah, and so the blends themselves are all handpicked by Jeff, and it's like, man, we've had a lot of conversations with him over the years, and he's been pretty influential in how we set up farms and stuff. And frankly, the product, it's in a name. It's Pure Wildlife Blend. So a lot of these other seeds that you see that are blue and orange and all these things, it's because they're coated with lime and they're dyed, and it's marketing at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of confidence in the seeds that Jeff has chose, and that's what we're going to be planting this year. And so right now, you can use code HUNTR10 for 10% off anything on the website.
So if you're looking for switch, clover, brassica, or Jeff's favorite, layer in the rye.
Layer in the rye.
Yep. Check out purewildlifeblends.com.
Kind of plays nicely into our conversation this morning. Tell us if we're off base on this or how you would translate it. We're talking about, I was relating switchgrass and CRP and any of the combination of the grasses is basically like drywall that gets laid onto a frame. Like you have to have an infrastructure of edge and structure and all the above. And so we were like, okay, we're talking about like an open pasture. In that case, we're like, okay, you can't just start with the switchgrass seemingly. Like you have to have edge. Like you have to have, you told us at ATA, nobody can see into your farms. A question that I'm like kind of leading towards here is cedars or spruces. We talked about the Egyptian grass. We're like, what is the best structure from which to build that, that whole deal?
Well, it all just depends on how much time, and if it's a long-term farm, short term you want to do with some type of grasses because you're going to go the quicker. But cedars are great. They can also spread, but they're very hardy trees, and if you're going to be there a long time, it's a wonderful tree because they're super thick and they just don't die. It all depends on what your long-term goals and how you're going to keep the farm and how fast you need to cover.
Yeah.
You think like cedars specifically? I mean, maybe this is a region specific thing here. I don't know that we have a lot of cedars. Like where I'm at in Ohio, it's like mainly what gets prescribed would be like a white pine or a Norway spruce. And I think both of those
up.
Eventually get too big though. Like they don't, I've seen a mature cedar.
Some of them. I mean, your spruce, honestly, the vulnerability around white pines, I don't know about the spruce.
They rub them.
And they eat them. They eat them.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the wintertime, they eat the hell out of them.
Yeah.
We'll go with grass. Just do a grass mix. It'll take you 2 years before it's 6-7 feet tall, maybe 3, depending on the soil type and rainfall.
Right, 3. I mean, that's the
I
problem.
gotta make some shit happen here.
Well, we keep talking about
Every
it.
time we
It's
talk about it, pisses me off that I haven't done it.
well, because it takes time to develop.
I'm
it.
like, what am I doing? I've had this farm for 7 years, and I feel like we do a lot, but it's too big, and I try to, it's just too big. To take
I mean,
it all
the
on
6
at once.
acres that Jeremy was talking about earlier, that is a great destination field.
Yeah.
Right. But I wouldn't even try to even go there for hunting season unless you got a gun in your hand. It's a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
They're going to get in, and if you don't have the right setup of where they're going to be close, you're never going to get them within bow range. It's just too much food.
Well, that was the problem is I took the leap kind of too far. I went from like I hardly have any food to plant to now I've got this basically open, palette to like do whatever I want with, and I just was like put as much food as possible here.
Well, what you could do, Jeremy, is go 2 different food sources.
Yeah.
Is go beans and beans or some type of grain, beans or corn on one side.
Yeah.
But divide it in half. On the border side of the transition, put some type of Egyptian wheat, borderline for big time, whatever you want to use to divide that line, and then then I would take that whole subset of 3 acres and I would go half with clover and half with brassicas.
Yeah.
All based on the setup and based on the wind.
Yeah.
So now you've got 3 food sources in one location.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. Well, and the other big thing.
And then you're going to have the clover that's going to green up first in the spring.
Yeah.
So you've got the turkeys and the deer that are going to be taking advantage of that right away.
Mm-hmm.
And then come early fall and mid fall, you got the brassicas changing, and that's going to be prime.
Yeah.
And then late season, you move over to the other side, and you've got the grain fields ready to go. And that doesn't mean you couldn't hunt there, the first handful of days of the season if the beans are still green.
Well, we
that's
open
what I would do.
First weekend in September too in Kentucky. So I mean, I've got green beans for sure.
So then, based on intel,
yeah,
you've got a wonderful setup. They're either going to be on the clover or they're going to be on the beans. If you don't have beans, you got corn. Well, then they're going to be in clover.
Yeah.
I mean, now your decision-making process is much more micro instead of big.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've taken the opportunities away for you to make decisions. Decisions now made for you because of the way you laid out your plot.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Yeah. And again, I'm used to, I've got a half acre here, maybe an acre food plot here of planting. And now it's like, I've got 20 plus acres of tillable that I can do whatever I want with. And it's
say my farm.
It's a bit overwhelming.
I got plenty of tillable.
I don't have any deer, but I mean, I got, that's why I have standing beans right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will say from an access standpoint, because you brought that up as being a piece, like that was a huge limiting factor this year in that, the way that this farm sets up is most of the deer, especially on anything west, were bedding on the far side of where I was set up. So I was having to try to pull them right through all of this food because I couldn't get any closer, or as soon as I got out of the stand, I was going to blow 7 acres of field out, getting out of there.
I think it's so helpful to talk through like how different guys see different farms. Cause like I can look, I've been looking at our family farm for 9-10 years. And I'm like, generally the same, like, there's growth. I see it differently from year to year, but when I have somebody else look at, like somebody with Greg's perspective or to be like, well, why aren't you doing it this way? I'm like, I don't know. I had never thought about it that way. Yeah. So helpful.
Well, I thought even your point on the screening. So I've used a lot of screening on that farm, mainly because of access issues trying to get in. There's a lot of people that'll say, well, if, I'm just doing switch everywhere for screening. I feel more comfortable using like the Egyptian wheat and stuff. Like it's just, I can manipulate it from year to year really quick. I'm just like, okay, I need to change this and just I'm just
switch is a little more permanent.
Switch is kind of, and it's a slower grow, right? Like what's it going to be 3 years before I have a 6 foot wall or something?
Yeah. That is the progression.
We use it a lot. And we're using it more and more every year. I've always said it's one thing when we get out of the set, it's one thing them to hear you.
Yep.
It's one thing them to smell you, right?
Yep.
I don't care if they hear me.
I
just don't want them to really see me or smell
exactly.
me, right? So the minute we get out, we're gone. We disappear. So I know they're hearing us. I know that.
How thick are those?
Because the wind's in my favor and we're getting out and I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
How thick are a lot of those screens? Like 10, 12 feet type things?
No, they're probably, our planter is 7 feet, so they're at least
14.
14 to 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whew. Yeah, I need to double up.
Yeah.
I think
You
I was
going
doing
single-
I was
single pass?
going 6 to 10 maybe.
Yeah, she's a double bagger.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
want to be
double
fast.
Yeah, the problem with
You
that
gotta get
is-
those numbers
the
up.
problem with that is when they come up in the summertime, you're like, oh, this is thick. Well, then you go back in the fall and you're like, ooh, I can see right through that.
Yeah.
You know, so it takes at least 2, if not 2.5, to get that coverage where you're really excited
I was gonna
about.
some of those places where like even just like through the middle of a field to try to funnel them, I would do just a single row, which my planter was 6 feet. And in the summertime, it looks thick. It was nothing for those deer to just basically stick their head through it and be like, oh, okay, I just go right on the other side. You know what I mean? Like there was no deterrence of a wall there. They just kind of look through and they're like, oh, this is weird. And just, Field of Dream style, just kind of walk through and come out the other end.
I think you'll see a change if you go at least 2 wide.
Okay.
And then maybe make an adjustment, see if it's not enough, then maybe go another half.
Yeah.
Because the more you put down, obviously, the more food you lose.
Sure.
So I would start with just going 2 wide and then see if it makes it work for you.
Well, fortunately, unfortunately, I've got a super low deer density there. So, I mean, I need food, but I don't need like an overwhelming amount of food. In fact, like this year, I mean, even right now, we've just come out a pretty strong winter stretch in Kentucky, and I think the most deer I saw on a 4-acre bean field on one of my like plot watch type cameras was like 7. Like there aren't a ton of deer down there, so it's not like they're going to eat themselves out of house and home necessarily. Like I can get a little bit more creative with it from a hunting strategy standpoint.
Yeah.
It's probably the biggest thing that we do now.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
That? What is the biggest thing?
The screen stuff.
Oh, really?
The screen. Yeah. We go through bags of it every year.
Yep.
I mean, it's one of the most important things we do.
Planting
And
around
to
your
your point-
bean time.
Yeah. And what, to your point, Jeremy, sometimes you learn something in a year or two and you're like, I don't like where the screen's going. And then you just change it.
You just change it. Yeah.
You just change it. And that's the great thing because Mother Nature's landscape is constantly changing. So that's what I love about it. It's more work. Yes. It's way more effective in the season that you plant it because you can take advantage of it and execute it that fall.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about it.
Do you use, it's more permanent, I know, and probably more expensive, but do you use miscanthus at all for like permanent screening?
I'm going to get I don't want to say, but there's a lot of people in this space that really love it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's non-invasive and invasive, and you better know which one you're going to plant because it's a ton of work. I just haven't done it because I'm scared of it because habitat work's a lot of work to begin with. And I've heard some really horror stories about that just taking over some sections of the farm.
Interesting.
Now, there's 2 types of species.
Yeah.
So you better make sure you do your homework.
Well, we planted something. We didn't do any homework, so I guess we'll see.
It's Brackett's fault.
Yeah, we got some planted.
No, I know they can be effective.
Yeah.
The only thing that I don't like about them is, to your point, you've got your farm that's 3 or 4 years old. Do you know it well enough to plant it now, knowing that that's a long-term goal thing that you're not going to want to replant that
We
with
do.
One edge
Egyptian
we did.
wheat or
We do.
You better be really thoughtful of where you're going to put it because it's
We
a lot
planted
of
a-
work and you don't.
Yeah, a south border, which
it's a property line. The only thing that would change it is if we bought the other
okay.
property. And even then, it still would be useful.
it was along like an ag field. So
Yeah, it was pretty safe.
But yeah, that in the case of, I think I know where you're talking about, like what we were just talking about for screening, like I could tell you right now, no, like because of access changes or we may plant this or we may CRP this, like I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be defined enough to say, yes, I'm always going to go in this way and come out this way.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wouldn't put it there.
Yep, agree. Yeah, that flexibility of that annual screening it's amazing too. Like that Egyptian wheat and stuff getting like 12, 14 feet tall. Like it's just, I mean, it's
serious
significant.
Stuff.
Yeah.
It is.
Got me itching to plant.
And it's crazy because when you're walking down these we may basically make a walkway. We cut through it and we it changes the confidence level of going to a set. It's kind of funny.
Oh man,
because you feel like you're going incognito. The only way you're going to see me is if you're in a drone at 12 o'clock.
Yep.
It's just weird how much more confident you create within that set by be able to do that, because they have no idea you're coming and going.
They have none. I've got one that
No.
leads right up. I've got a box blind on kind of this little knob that overlooks this big bean plot, which was mainly for gun hunting. And so, like, I cut a tunnel there, and Harlan and I are walking up. We get in there. As soon as we get in, he's like, "There's like 5 deer out here." I'm like, "They had no idea, dude. They had no idea." Like, you know, literally, we're walking through a tunnel and climb up the stairs, and you're in, and like, no clue.
It's fun. There's some you can just tell, like they just set up so perfectly, and it's like, I mean, there's always, you know,
Sure.
a neighbor like that cove setup of ours. I'm like, you know, anybody could look at that and be like, it's the best setup in the world. Like if the deer's there and it's like
minus the secondhand smoke.
That's right. Well, that's what I mean. It's like you got
From the
you
neighbors.
got some other out of your control elements, but
Yeah.
well, Greg, I think I know the answer, right? Because you're a very nuanced guy, which I appreciate about you. And that is the right answer. But generally speaking, you have farms in Iowa, or a farm in Iowa and a farm in Missouri. Do you have a preference between the two? Can you draw a distinction? Which one's better? What do you think?
The Iowa farm is not. It's at a different level.
Mm-hmm.
I've had it longer.
It's better.
I put more effort into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think if the forever farm is in Iowa, if you said I had to liquidate and, you know, God willing, something happened drastically, I'd do everything I could not to sell that one.
Yeah.
And do you think that's because of things that are in your control or out of your control? Like, is that the state legislation that makes it that way? Yeah.
I think it's the axis is amazing. I have all wind directions.
Okay.
I've created plots in every wind direction. We've created water in every wind direction. It just lays out really, really, really well. Mm-hmm. And that's what I saw from the arrow. I'm like, this thing has everything. It just doesn't have the habitat. It has what I can use as a, what do you want to say? A starting point of, does it have wind direction? Does it have the cover? Does it have all these things? And it had everything else I knew that I wanted. It was up to me to do. And that's where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And since we've done that it's probably taking me to get this farm where it is, probably 15 years.
Yeah.
And I would say in the last 11 has been amazing.
I was going to ask, like, how much, when you walked into that, obviously, no habitat, right? The food wasn't there. The cover wasn't there. How much did you bite off and try to change at a time? I think that's mine and Jared's. If there's like we talked about the list earlier, and it's like, I'm going to make this list, even though well knowing there's no way in hell I'm going to accomplish this list this year. Right. Like,
well, I started with the list, and then I said, okay, I can't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most, I took the section of the farm that I knew I was going to hunt the most based on wind direction. Okay. So I said, I'm going to use this as a test case.
Okay.
And I did the TSI work. I did all the water. I did all those things, redesigned some plots, redesigned some thoroughway, did the gypsum wheat. And I said, okay, now let's let this sit. Because it took me, basically the summer to do that.
Yep.
And then, like I said, I did the micro side. And then I'm like, man, I saw stuff right away year one. And I saw it like getting better year two. And I'm like, okay, we have the recipe. Now we just need to do the micro aspect and start going around the farms in different sections based on the wind directions and duplicate that. And so, because once you cut a tree, you can't glue it back on.
Right.
And so you want to make sure you're doing the things the right way and not wasting time, effort, energy, and the financial commitment behind all this stuff and make mistakes, because you lose a season. It's very frustrating.
Oh yeah.
And so, and a lot of those mistakes, honestly, to your question, I learned the hard way on the 3 previous farms that I didn't end up keeping.
Yeah.
I screwed up a lot. And that's,
it's valuable.
Yeah, I think those are your best lessons, or the ones that hurt the most.
Yeah. I think that I'm glad you kind of described it like that, because, and I talk to a lot of people about it, but, we get people will send a farm all the time and they'll be like, hey, what should I do here? And even in my own stuff, I'm like, I constantly try to bite off more than I can chew. And if I broke it down into more of that micro habitat thinking, yeah, constantly, you know me too well. It'd be interesting, because I guess, I'm always thinking of this farm has to be more attractive than this neighbor or this property, or it needs to have this. Otherwise, next season is out.
I think you're doing the right thing. Most of the stuff you've done has worked out.
It has. It hasn't been on a as fine-tuned of a level as I'd like. Like it's been, so I guess my mindset has been kind of reverse. Like, again, being big woods, first thing I normally do is I add food. I make clearings and I add food.
Yeah.
Right. And then maybe it's like in Ohio, it was a timber cut last year. This year in Kentucky, it for sure is going to be some sort of cover timber aspect of things. So I've done that on bigger levels, and the problem is I'm slipping seasons there, right? Like if I added all that food in Kentucky last year, it definitely helped. Did it make it a better hunting farm? No, because frankly, I probably had less access than I had the year before because there was just food everywhere. Like these deer were just all over the place. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like from a landscape level versus thinking of it differently.
Yeah. Well, and I guess Greg, the way he described it is different than. I guess I'll ask this: would you? Because from a macro standpoint, you're like, hey, this farm needs food.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet Greg would agree if you look at it and say, yeah, that's pretty low hanging fruit. The farm does need food.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you kind of have to tackle those big projects.
But there's a bigger word when you come to food, though, right? Does it have year round food? Do you have the
Yeah.
clover? Do you have the brassicas? And do you have grain? If you can't check all three boxes, you're going to lose your deer. They're going to move on depending on what time of year that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's a segment that most people don't think about. Like that 6-acre section that Jeremy has, don't have it in all one food source.
Right.
Have it in at least 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's because of those sections we're talking about. Like we want to create pockets of deer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but you also want to give them to move within that section. If you have one food source, they're going to stay there. They have no reason to go over here. It's the same food source.
Mm-hmm.
But if you give them 2 or 3 different food sources, they're grazers. We all know that. So they're going to hit this and move through this and then move through this. And then you can dictate how you want them to move. And by chance, they're going to be at 30 yards at some point through that transition zone.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be waiting for them.
Do people ever ask you to design farms for them or do consults all the time? Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, I mean, when you've seen and done, I mean, experience is the biggest key in all of this,
Yeah.
right? Because, I mean, we can all look at a farm and we could all say, well, I would do this. But really, there's some sort of justification of why we said that.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people that are just throwing wet noodles at the wall too. But, from an overview, it's like, I would do this because, in my experience, X.
Yep. Well, in the same way, like it's interesting to get people's perspectives on farm, especially like, and I know you don't identify as like a consultant, but there's plenty of people out there who, will give opinions on farms. And I'm like, it can depend a lot on how you prefer to hunt. Like, a hunting strategy. So I've seen plans that I'm like, I wholeheartedly disagree with this. I'm like, yeah, that'll probably kill them, but I wouldn't do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think there's a big difference, guys, and guys that are out there that are consultants of habitat consultants versus habitat consultants that have a strategy to set up the farm to how to kill them.
Agree.
2 different knowledge bases.
Completely.
And if they don't have a wall to show you that they can kill deer, they can have all the best habitat in the world. But if you don't set up the habitat in the right direction and create that flow that we've been talking about the last 2 hours, it's pointless.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pointless.
No, I agree. I mean, hell, I put myself in that boat early in my career. When I was in my mid to late 20s, I did a lot of consulting from a habitat side. Like I could tell you what you needed to have here or what you needed to do, or even to the biological side of like which deer to kill, how many to kill, etc. Right. But from like a standpoint of like how to set it up to kill them,
it's an art.
I mean, my wall was not the guy you wanted to talk to about that. Just wasn't. At that point in time, hell, I spent most of my time hunting public land.
Yeah, it's an art. It's awesome. It's a really cool. I mean, that's what keeps you up at night thinking about that stuff.
But once you figure out the recipe, it's so duplicatable.
Have you thought about like the micro stuff on your place? Like, what if you took a piece and started doing the grasses and cedars on? Like,
well, my farm's got all kind of issues.
I know, but I'm just saying,
the
like,
problem with the micro strategy on mine is when I make a section of it good, everybody's going to want to hunt it. So
I get that.
It's not in my sole control.
But if you make a section good, to Greg's point, then you're like, okay, this is it. This is what we need. This is the recipe to apply to the rest of it. Because I say that because you're not going to bite off the 1,000 acres and just like, I'm just going to go do cedars on 1,000 acres this year. That ain't going to happen. I know you think so. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not.
Yeah.
So like, do you break down a portion of the Roberts or something, and you're like, here, this is the best spot?
I guarantee you, if you break down a section of your farm and you go all in on this little section from year-round food, TSI, woody browse, great access, you give it 2 years, that section will be the #1 section on your entire farm.
Yeah.
I have no doubt about it.
I agree.
It has to happen because that's where they want to be. And they want to be there because you've provided. I've always said, if you're a deer and you walk on a farm and do you have everything that a deer needs?
Mm-hmm.
If the question is yes, you don't have anything left to do. If the question of that is no, you got to get to work.
Yeah.
We as hunters give the reason why whitetail leave. Because they're not happy there. They're leaving for a reason. You got to figure out what that reason is. Once you figure out that reason, solve it, and you'll have that habitat and that structure and that age structure starting to domino effect because they're not leaving.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to figure out.
Here's where I struggle with the micro approach. I mean, it makes every bit of logical sense. Where I personally struggle with it is from like a scalability. Like, not that because it works over here that it won't work over there, but like I have a hard time in my mind not stepping back and looking at the like very big picture. And I'm like, everything I do here is going to affect this part of the farm. And so like the reason I don't take that approach or that I struggle with it is because I'm constantly thinking about how it's going to tie into to all the other remaining of the farm. Because I'm like, if I set this all up for, my eastern access and I pinch them through here and this or that or whatever, but then what if 2 years from now I want this whole field that I'm accessing through to be now covered? And so I'm like, you know what I mean? The layers of that are challenging to see 10 years down the road. I'm like, how are these all going to play off of each other?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the sooner you start, the more you're going to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wonder, like, because this year, you've obviously got one part of that farm has the best deer on it.
You would love this farm, Greg, because it's such a fun, like there's so much room for improvement.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess the way to put it.
So if you applied that mindset and say, okay, I'm going to do it to this part of the farm. Sure, it's already good. And yes, you not thinking about it, but you may have, hey, who gets to hunt that next year? Beyond that, from to Greg's point, from being a steward of the land, make it prove that that's the way to do it. And then, go mimic it in 2 or 3 other places and you start to spread your people out.
Yeah. And we kind of have, I mean, what's dictated that is basically where you can see success. So like,
because of neighbors
years ago. Yeah. Because of pressure. Yeah. For the most part, it's like years ago we started on all of it. I'm like, hey, every opening's got to have a clover plot and blah, blah, blah. And then over the years, it's just like there was no growth. There was no like, okay, they're reaching a new age class. And so over the years, like, you get frustrated by, I did all this work in this area and like these deer all die and stuff. So you gravitate towards where, well, that one made it through. And so now here we are, however many years down the road, I landed on an area where I'm like, okay, this part of the farm has the least amount of neighboring pressure. Ohio's a bait state, Greg. So we struggle a lot with, deer getting sucked off basically and killed.
Right.
And so a majority of like my micro focus now is in the area of the farm. Like, okay, this has the least amount of external factor. I have the most control over this. That's kind of where we're at now. So I've identified that part of the farm, and frankly, I'm trying to get my parents to sell, consolidate, move our focus in that direction. Pick up the neighboring piece, and so that's what we're doing now.
One thing, and you guys know this because you guys are sharp and you're successful in your own way. The guys who I always listened to was guys who consistently kill big stuff. The guys who kill a big one every 3, 4, or 5 years, no disrespect, I don't listen to what they have to say. I chase guys like Mark and Lee, and that's when back 20, 25 years ago, I was in the room listening and I didn't say anything
Yeah.
And there's a recipe to all this, and it's very duplicatable. It's just you got to figure it out. Once you figure it out, I mean, you can start laying giants on a regular basis. And the guys that do, they typically kill big stuff every single year.
Yeah. No doubt.
It really isn't rocket science. It's who wants to do the work, and most people don't.
Sure. Yeah.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
That
And
makes
that's
sense.
the off-season stuff. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. We see that too.
Yeah, no, a lot of it. Yeah, I mean I think that's a big one. Like, and it's no disrespect to him, but especially with social media and stuff, is like, you know, you'll see something and you're like, damn, like that guy killed a giant. But if you look at the historical of it and what the future looks like, it becomes very sparingly that they trip on those things.
Yeah. Well, there's no one way either, or right or wrong way.
No.
I mean, there's, you know, guys kill them in all different kinds of environments. It's like, but we found what we like. We love the land stewardship aspect of it,
Sure.
and growing a deer from a young age to an old age, and then, you know, having all that. I mean, that's the pinnacle, right? And so,
yeah, I mean, as much as like, and we talked about it this year probably more than anything, just because of how the season went. It's like, you know, we had several deer that were of our goal target, 5+ years old, that, you know, from December on, we were just kind of like, hey, we're just not that mad at this deer. Like, I'd love to see him make another.
You know
year.
why? Because we're idiots. because we know, because we killed old ones, and we're like, when we know deep down that we're like 5. As much as we'll say, 5 and up, we're like,
sure.
You know, you hear Likoski be like, it's 8. You know, you know, and you hear, you know, and to know that it's like, okay, it's 6 to 8 range, and so.
Or selfishly, it's like if we've killed, like I killed 2, you killed 1. If you kill that and then you just go and kill that one, it's like, yeah, you're excited about it, but also it's like next year you may not have killed anything and you kill it, you're going to be more excited at that point.
The relationship, what describes it the best to me is the relationship that we have with deer is like we are so stoked about, and just like it's so cool to see them evolve, and we love the animal so much that it's like I'm dying to see their maximum potential and hunt them in that environment.
Agree.
And so even though it's like a dumb decision, I'm like, it's almost like they're guaranteed to get killed by the neighbor. I'm like, I just almost can't bring myself to shoot it, because I'm like, because why? Because then it'll just be dead, and I like it better alive.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a tough one. That's a tough discussion to have with people. Like, even within my own family,
it's not real. It's not a realistic one. You know what I mean? Most people can't obtain that level of acreage or access or control or be in the right neighborhood to ever see that be a reality.
Yeah. Well, it's just even in the career aspect. We talked about this morning, what we say, 2018 was the last time you killed a buck on your family farm.
Yeah.
And you hunt the shit out of it.
17, I think. 18. No, yeah, you're right.
So, you know, 6+ years. And it's
see, in this, you're getting into more. I do this dance with my farm, Greg, where I'm like, I hunt it hard, right? But I'm like, do I really want to kill what's there? I'm like, I'd rather see him just live. But what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
You know, so, and in the meantime, we try to find better farms, and we do out-of-state stuff, and you guys like Josh and Lucas Psycho, and it's like, I kill great deer almost every year because I'm a good guest, apparently, and people, you know, have me out to their stuff.
But those home farms the
home farms just suffer, and they just are what they are in the meantime, and
they kind of feed the year-long
they're lifelong
efforts.
projects, you know, someday.
Yeah.
Someday.
I mean, if we went by Greg's recipe, you should put that one behind the barn and put one behind its ear.
Well, right. But it's enough acreage, and it's it's more than just a deer hunting farm. It's my family farm.
Yeah.
And so it's not one that we can sell. It's not in my control anyway.
Sure.
So the only choice I have is to make it better over the long term. So that means cedars and switchgrass and food and 40-acre sections and all the above. Yeah, you're not right. It's fun. It's fun to talk it out with you, because it's like, we know the answers to most of this. It's fun to hear your take and your perspective, and to be on the other side.
Yeah,
where
but
it's worked,
I mean,
you know?
I think somebody, I don't know which one of you guys said it earlier, is, you know, the great thing about whitetail hunting, there's a million ways to do this.
Oh yeah.
I'm just telling you what works for me
Yeah.
and what my experience has told me, and through my failures and successes. So you could talk to somebody tomorrow on the next podcast, and they're going to say, hey, you know, what Greg said, that won't work for me. Maybe not.
Yeah.
You know, but I've sat in a lot of conversations at, deer and turkey expos or whatever they may be, and we sit in the corner and we dissect places, and the next year I'll be walking down, they charge me like, man, your idea was perfect. We killed our biggest deer, or we killed the giant we wanted to giant. A lot of it is just, letting somebody else see it differently.
Yeah.
Because you're living on that farm, and sometimes it's tough to see what was really there.
Yeah. The blinders piece is a danger, because we're so vested in these properties and we care so much about, the deer on it and everything that goes on with it. We end up putting blinders on to like what probably should be done in some cases, just because it's like, back to that landscape level. It's like, well, I got to put all this food on, or I need to do all this cuts, or I need to do all this to change it. And we end up missing probably some things that, whether it's a Greg or somebody else, would look at and say, well, why don't you just do this? And like, that would make this whole area, like, you probably kill every deer on the farm there. And you're like, yeah, probably could. Huh?
We balance each other out nicely in that sense here. I'm okay with that. I think. I don't know. well, either way, Greg, I hope that you will get some satisfaction out of seeing us succeed, because you've now invested knowledge into us, and so we're going to take that and apply it.
Yeah.
And it's always fun, guys. That's the great thing about this is, sharing this stuff, because you guys might do something and learn something that I don't even know and say, hey, have you done? No, I haven't. What'd you learn?
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about this is there's just so much out there to learn. It's really, it never seems to end.
Yeah. Well, I think like you said, that Mother Nature constantly is evolving and throwing twists at us that, you can't just find, that comfort zone and stay in it. You've got to be willing to be on your toes and be ready to react and respond to changes that are happening on that landscape.
That's the big thing. Because some of the stuff we did 4 or 5 years ago, we're not working anymore. Because Mother Nature's changed, and we got to go back in there and fix it.
Yeah.
So it could be 2 or 3 trees that fell and blocked the path. I'm like, why are they not coming into this side of the farm anymore? Why are they exiting differently? Something's not right. Well, shed season, you go in there and you start walking around. And you're like, here's 3 trees that blocked the trail. Now they're going 50, 60 yards another path and created their own path. That's not where I want them to be.
Yeah.
Because then it changes my access and wind directions. I got to have them coming out of this part of the plot, and so we'll redirect it.
That's a huge thing. Obviously, different areas were more affected than others, but when that Hurricane Helene came through, the eastern part, and then really hit into eastern Kentucky, where my farm was at, it was October timeframe, I guess, and ultimately I'm up in there, and I usually have 2 4-year-olds and a 5 or 6-year-old to hunt on this what I consider more mountain ground behind my cabin, and like, I'm just like, none of the deer that should have made it showed up. Like, I was worried about EHD, and then I'm worried about poaching. And so I ended up taking walks on 2 ridges that are adjacent to me. It's big public national forest. And I couldn't even crawl through the amount of down trees from that hurricane on these ridges. And in that area, that is how the deer travel. Like, if you go down in a bowl, you may be looking at straight up sandstone cliffs. Like, the deer aren't coming out of there. They're walking the ridges and then dropping in saddles and stuff. And they just couldn't do it. Like, it was nearly impossible. So they just diverted. And I think a lot of the deer that usually move onto my property in mid-October and stay through most of the fall just were like, I'm not going that way.
It's funny you say that, because you could sit there and watch this stuff from your set and go, okay, why are they doing this? They used to do this last year.
Yeah.
So my first thing is make a note and go, okay, we're going in there in the spring and figure it. I'm not going to do it now, obviously.
Sure.
But I'm going to go in there in the off season and go, what's changed? Something's changed to change their behavior, and that's a battle you got to just make mental notes on, and then have the fortitude to go in there in the off season and figure it out. And it's usually nothing that's too drastic, but a little bit of work will fix it, and you can drop trees another direction to force them back where you want them to be.
Yeah.
But Mother Nature's, she's an animal that you will never beat.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, a lot of people, especially in the Midwest here, you talk about Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, are finding that out from an EHD side of things, right? I mean, the way that EHD has changed herd dynamics in some of the best places to deer hunt has been huge, and people are having to, start to pivot. When you wait those 4 to 5 years to build these deer up to 5, 6 years old. And then all of a sudden EHD comes in and all your 5-year-olds are dead. All your 4-year-olds are dead. You have a few 3-year-olds and a few 2-year-olds. And it's like, you just started over.
Yeah, it's true. Unfortunately, it's true. But in most cases, when they come out of that, you have some really nice deer.
Yeah.
In most cases.
More resources, more space for the deer that were left behind.
Yeah, and less social stress.
I mean, I think that it's because of how a lot of us were raised, but the deer sightings thing has been one that continues to come up on this podcast and through a lot of our listeners, in that like people still continue to judge their success by the number of deer they see, right? Like if they see a pile of deer in a field, they're like, yeah, it was a successful hunt. Doesn't matter if they're hunting 1 6-year-old or not. And, when you get into a lot of these situations, that there's too many deer, right? It's a complete disadvantage to what your ultimate goal is, which is killing big mature bucks. And, it's probably the hardest thing to kind of decouple yourself from as a deer hunter, is that, you just really need to see the one deer, right? That's the deer that you need to see. That's the deer that you're after. But oftentimes we're so just tied to, well, yeah, I saw 20 tonight and I saw $5. Like, it was a pretty good night. And it's like, boy, that's a lot of deer for that area.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And when I changed as a deer hunter from a strategy standpoint is when I chased this one right over my shoulder called Major League. And I chased him for 4 years. And I told myself, I'm going to learn everything I can about him. And I just made the season about him. My point of this is, if you really want to be good at hunting and a strategy of hunting, focus on one animal. I don't care if it's a 4 or 5-year-old. I don't care if it's a 120 or 160. It's irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Pick that one out and learn everything about him. Find his sheds. Where is he coming? Where is he bedding? All those things. And it'll change how you address every other whitetail that you go after from there forward, because he will force you to do things and learn things you didn't know was possible.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, that individual targeting of a deer is it's another level for a lot of people, and a lot of people won't ever get to it. But I think once you go into that, I mean, that's almost the only way I hunt anymore. If I walk on a property, I'm after one deer. Like
Are you still doing that, Greg? I mean, is it one deer, or is it like, hey, there's a handful that I would shoot in this
it's usually 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're purposely going to a set for a deer. For a specific, you're purposely going in for a set on a specific deer.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we just lost one of the EHD that went 242, and he was 8, if not 9 years old. 100% 8. I could arguably say he's 9. And
wow.
We spent a lot of time last summer trying to figure that out and all that stuff. And the setup was perfect. It's just that he died the last week of September, and it was opening day of October 1st. So we had the last picture was September 23rd, and his buddy that he was running with all summer long showed up the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd, and he was not there. And he was dead to rights if he would have came out. Wow. And then I'm like, I don't have a good feeling about this. And so we went in on the 20th. So I'm like, I can't burn the whole season if he's gone or dead. And then we found him on the 21st of October. We found him.
Wow.
And yeah.
What had been your history with that deer leading up to that? How many years did you know him? And
we've known him since he was 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
All the way through. And when did
we don't really start, we don't categorize them or file trail picks until they're 3.
Yeah.
And that's when we start going back and just creating a file for each one.
When did you start hunting that deer? How old?
Just last year, in fall of 24, we let him go. He was a mid 80s, in 23.
Wow.
And we believe that he was 7, if not 8. And I had another deer that I wanted to chase because he was as old, but bigger. And so we chased him and let him have a free pass, and then he blew up.
That's wild.
Yeah, almost 50, 60 inches.
Wow. What can you attribute that to anything, or?
I have talked to biologists. I've talked to a lot of guys I have a lot of respect for, and I have come to the conclusion that, not every deer has the potential of being a 200-inch deer. If they were, they'd be everywhere. They're just not.
Yeah.
The question I now have great amount of question within the management of deer is, at what age do they jump? I thought 5 to 6 was the big jump and 6 to 7 was a big jump. Well, this one did it at 8, if not 9. So now my question is, how many deer that I have shot that were 6 or 7 years old, what they have done? Now my conclusion to some of this is, I think most deer have one big jump in their life. Don't know if it's going to be at 6 or 7 or 5, but when they have a big jump like that is when you probably should kill them.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they're going to do it again. And that's just based on observation for, 2 decades.
And that starts somewhere, right? Like most deer jump pretty big from 3 to 4. But I'm assuming that's not the jump.
They do, but
you're
I'm talking about these big jumps that are, 20 to 40 inches.
Yeah.
All of my 200s had a minimum of 30, if not 40-inch jumps.
Yeah.
Wow.
So beyond the normal antler growth cycle of, okay, he's a 2-year-old, he's going to put on 30, he's going to double to 3, and then he's going to put on 30 inches to 4. Eventually, it's like he's kind of at this line, and then he makes that bump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Greg, do you?
That's why we've pitted now. We used to shoot a lot of 5s and 6s, and now I don't anymore. I focus on 6 as a minimum and try to chase 7 and 8s.
Yeah.
I think it probably.
I know that sounds really, really foolish.
No, I mean
it. I get it.
It goes back to just like, our goal is to see these deer hit maximum potential, like what they can do. I think as you get, especially these deer that are 7, 8 plus, I think it's all tied to energy. I think it's tied to their home range and core areas shrink down. They don't have to move as much. And then I think that their breeding aspect of it decreases as well dramatically.
I agree with you, Jerm. I 100% agree with you.
I think that energy, that ends up just being stored for that year going into the next is what triggers that explosion.
Almost makes you wonder. Go ahead.
I think you're dead on, Jeremy. I think you're absolutely right.
It seems logical, right? I mean,
almost makes you wonder if like the pretty good scoring ones that are running around like idiots,
I know.
if they ever stop breeding like that, if they'll
they would explode.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I mean, you've seen it on these deer. I mean, even some of these bucks. Well, we talked about it with our Iowa bucks. Like, at least mine, when we skinned that deer out. Now he had some injuries and stuff, but I mean, that was first week in November, and that deer didn't have an ounce of fat on him.
Yeah.
Like he was going to be hurting this winter.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it's just so taxing when the rut. The just even these hard winters getting up and moving, especially when they have bigger home ranges and stuff. It's like, all of sure, it's easy for a deer to track 5 miles in a night, but like if he doesn't have to, why the hell would he? So I think the older they get, we know that these core areas and these home ranges shrink as they get to that substantially old age. We know that these 4, 5, and 6-year-old bucks are probably way more aggressive in the breeding cycle, and these 7 and 8-year-old bucks are like, listen, man, I'll pick up a doe or two, but have at it. I've done my share, and I think that just leads to this opportunity.
Dude, that age range of bucks, like I don't know where the line is, but it's just like they're just like the coolest thing ever. Like to get I don't know if it. To look at that Iowa buck that I killed, I'm like, we think he was 7.
I would say that's a great example of,
He's a great example. Your wide boy is a great example of these deer that for us have reached an extreme age of maturity. I'm just like, it's just to look at even a 4-year-old buck. Yeah. That's a great example of like a deer that most people would shoot,
Oh, 100%.
Including us sometimes.
Absolutely.
And to try to compare that to it's just like not even the same animal.
No, it's the same animal.
I'm like, we call that a mature.
It's double the age.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because not to blame it at all, I'm sure he'll appreciate this, is like for a long time, my bar was set off. Bill Winke said, 4 years old and older. Yeah. That's what we call a mature deer on our farm. He was a big influence on me as a teenager. And so I just, for some reason, had that number in mind, but I'm sure even he, to reflect on that, would be like, in some cases seems like they got a ways to go.
And since then, some of those deer he was hunting were really 3.
Right.
He's come out recently and said that.
Yeah.
Like I thought they were 4, but in actuality they were 3.
Sure.
Yeah, it's and I mean, obviously we're talking about like the upper percent of percent, right? Like, I mean, it's so hard to get a deer to 5, let alone 7 or 8 or whatever it might be.
Greg can't see this horn here, and it's not an astounding genetic deer, but there's a shed on the wall here off a buck called Wide Boy that was on a lease in Kansas that Jeremy and I had, and Jeremy first picked him up before
2014.
Yeah.
When
you thought at that time he was probably 5 or 6.
Yes.
Mature by all of our standards, and probably like mid-50s,
just clean 10.
And he was just there every year. There he was. He's just kind of this wide load, fairly short tine looking thing, 7, 8, 9 years old. We thought this thing must be, and he's still just the same thing. 10 years old, he blows up to, what do you think he was? Like 186, mid-80s, as a 10-year-old deer.
Never had been probably better than a mid-50s in his life.
Yeah.
In fact,
So there's another example of it.
At
what age do they really top out? I thought 7 was it, and after 7 they start going down. I've been proven wrong multiple times now.
Sure.
So, and you just got another one at 10.
Yeah.
So what is the age? I think it has to do with the DNA. I think it has to do with a lot of variables in the soil, food, all the resources that we've been talking about for the last 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And every deer is going to act differently. Every deer is not going to be in Michael Jordan. It's just not going to happen.
No. And there will be. I'm sure there's plenty of deer that, let's say they're a 140-inch 8-point at 5, and by the time they get to 8, they're still 140-inch 8-point. Like there are those deer out there. Like by the bell curve, it exists. It's just there could be something that from an energy standpoint could blow them through the ceiling.
I do wonder though if geographically, like the nutrition probably has to be there. I don't know. I used that Lebrowski deer as kind of my example of like, I think he was
7.
I think he was 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And like by all indications, he peaked at 4.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was a very weak genetic deer. You know what I mean? At the very most, he was 140-inch 8-point.
Yeah.
But then Dad killed him last year as a 120-inch 6-point.
6-point. Mm-hmm.
And I sure didn't seem like he was going to turn it around. I don't know if that was just his genetic to peak at that age.
I also think that deer was still covering a lot of ground.
Yeah.
From the way he moved.
And maybe it's just him. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Or I mean, there'll probably be more of those deer that don't ever blow up than there are the deer that do blow up.
Yeah.
But I do agree with Jeremy. The less energy they put out, the more they put into themselves. And all of the big stuff that I've killed, that's exactly the storyline.
Yeah.
Is their core is shrunk. They don't travel as much. And when they come out to a plot, they look around, they look at all the does, and they're like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
And they just don't care.
Greg, do you feed on either of your farms? Do you feed like protein pellets or anything during the summer?
In Missouri, I can't. Period. It's not. It's against the law.
All right.
We do a little bit in Iowa, but not much. We do some, more or less for camera inventory.
Yeah.
But we have, that all has to be pulled out a couple of weeks before opening day. We're doing it now, just for shed inventory.
Yeah.
But not at any level that's worth mentioning. No.
Interesting. Do you feel like you're missing out by not doing that, or?
For sure. I am.
Really?
It's a financial thing.
Yeah.
It's just
just money, Greg.
Much. I want to stay married.
Yeah.
Right.
Because getting divorced is pretty goddamn expensive.
That's more expensive than the feed bill.
That is, and so I would love to. I just financially, I try to do it in other ways, which is leave a lot of grain and food plots and TSI and that type of thing. And yes, am I not making their max potential? Sure, I don't disagree, but I just financially, I can't do it.
Yeah. Would it be that expensive? I mean, do you think you could?
Well, it's what you want, right? How much do you want to put into it? There is no end.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's, I mean, that's, I was going to just say that, like, I've got 28 acres behind the house. As soon as the season ended, I put out 100 pounds of feed, and does and fawns ate it in 36 hours. I
was going to say 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. It's just, so, I mean, even when I was in Ohio, so after I was done hunting this week in Ohio, I put out, I don't know, 2,200 pounds of sweet feed, just 16%, standard sweet feed. And that'll be gone next week, I'm sure. Like, they'll
You
just
put out 2,200 pounds?
Mhm.
Yeah. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
But it'll be gone, and it'll be gone next week. I bet they'll eat. Between the feeder, like most of the feeders are 200 to 400 pound feeders, and they'll clean them out in 7 to 10 days in these kind of conditions.
Yeah.
The problem I try to avoid, and this is not a knock on it, but I had a place in Kansas years ago, and I went in there with my mindset of I'm going to do my strategy, my food plot, my whole thing, and heck with feeders. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to try to beat this curve and not feed. And that was a rude awakening for me. I did it for 2 years. All my neighbors around me were feeding, and you're either in the game or you're out.
Yeah, that's it.
It's that simple.
Yep.
And so I started feeding them, and I'm like, oh, it changed like that quick.
Yep.
And then I looked at the bill, and I'm like, the wife looked at it, and she goes, this ain't happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part.
sold it.
You can't stop. Like that's
Interesting.
I mean, you could, if you're feeding all summer and then and this is in bait states, obviously, and then opening day comes and you feed a little bit and then you're like, man, I can't get here for 3-4 weeks and nobody's tending to that stuff. Those deer will leave. We talked about this the other day.
100%.
They're marrying themselves, and it's so funny. Like, and I'm not saying just all mature bucks, but like just bucks in general, they'll marry themselves to a bait station. Basically, could be your neighbor's 5 acres, your neighbor's 20 acres, the guy who's got 400 next. They'll sit, and then when that person stops hunting and stops feeding, whoop, they show right back up. And it's the craziest thing. It literally is creating their own little micro environment.
Yeah. And it was a very expensive lesson. I thought I could beat that.
Yeah.
And
I'd love to think that. Yeah.
I learned it the hard way. And so guy called me, said, hey, you want to sell your farm? I said, no. And he said, sure. And I looked at the bill and I said, yeah, I'll sell it.
Yeah.
You know what? Yeah.
Feed bill is too much. It's got to go.
Yeah, it would be, and that's the shittiest part about bait states, because it's like if I can create the best habitat, I can do TSI, I can have tons of browse, I can have great food plots, I can have great standing, grain, and then I get beat by a 200-pound corn pile. There's nothing more frustrating than that.
Agreed, 100%.
And it's
100%.
like all the work I do all spring and summer in that state is defeated by somebody who did nothing. And I'm not just saying somebody like pointing it out, but I'm just saying like the joy we get of doing all that work is so that when the fall comes, the success is rewarded. And it's not. It's completely siphoned at that point.
Yeah. I would love to see every state just say, hey, because a lot of companies, rely on feeding, and I respect that.
Sure.
I wish they would say, hey, feeding doesn't start until after the season close, and you got to shut it down a month or 6 weeks before opener.
Yeah.
And that's it. I don't, because feeding is good for the herd. It is. It's just expensive. Not everybody can do it because of the financial commitment. But I'm not a big fan of the bait states, just because of I've owned land in the bait states, and that was just an expensive lesson for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think everybody knows how I feel about it. So,
you're pro baiting. We get it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that's my home farm there is in Ohio too. So it's the same thing. I mean, in my opinion, there's no reason to keep it. It's basically a welfare program for small, properties that border, larger ones, frankly, where deer are naturally going to incline, wherever better habitat is. The size isn't, it is a factor, but it, and it's just the reality is we've had legislators from Ohio and guys that are involved in that, and they just, they're afraid we'll lose hunters because they are aware that we have an entire generation of hunters who don't know how to kill deer without a corn pile. So, and that's their words, not mine.
Yeah, I understand. The woodmanship has been lost in a lot of ways.
For sure. Yet the data suggests that we would kill more deer without bait piles. Like all of the data.
Yeah, everything would be better. You know what I mean? There will be a time frame of transition there, but yeah, so we're actively having conversations with our lieutenant governor, it's the governor who sets rules and stuff like that,
Sure.
if it's going to be put into legislation. So, and our lieutenant governor just got promoted to fill J.D. Vance's
Senate spot
there. So he's out. The lieutenant governor doesn't really do anything anyways, but
yeah.
Anyways, yeah, that's the long battle for our hope for Ohio,
Well, the hope is that like even the people that are on 5 and 10 acres in a bait state, I want them to have a good hunting experience. I don't think that they get that sitting over a corn pile.
Well, they think they do. It's hard to give up. I mean, if they can go out there and shoot a 3 or 4 year old every year, they're like, they would do anything to keep that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
I think there's less and less of those people, though. I think there's less people just going and killing a 4-year-old on a corn pile. I think there may be like a 1-year-old or 2-year-old or maybe some does.
No. I'm plenty of guys shoot 4-year-olds on corn piles. Yeah, it's pretty common. You go down to our taxidermist, go down to Travis' place there, and there's a whole wall of 3 and 4-year-olds.
There are a lot of 2-year-olds on that wall.
Yeah, there's some 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
But guys want to shoot big deer. I mean, that's not a, and that's, if that's as big as they can get, then that's what they shoot.
Well, I was going to say big is
it's relative.
Subjective term.
Yeah.
So,
anyways. All right. Well, Greg, we've taken enough of your time here, man. Well, we appreciate your
man,
hanging with us and
always
coaching us through these
always
issues.
Good to share like-minded discussions for sure. I mean, that's pretty much why Jared and I started the podcast.
Yeah.
It's fun sharing ideas, guys, and that's how we all grow. And a lot of this stuff is all based on experiences, and I can only speak on my experiences, and someone may disagree with me, but that's all I know of how I failed and succeeded is based on my own personal failures and fixing them. Yeah. So that's the great thing about whitetail hunting. There's a million ways to do it, just what works best for them.
Before we let you go, where can people see the HUNTWorks stuff?
Yeah, we're on Sportsman's Channel, 3rd and 4th quarter.
Okay.
We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, predominantly YouTube and Sportsman's Channel.
Are you putting the full episodes on YouTube?
Yeah, we have basically 3 channels within the channel. We've got the Hunt Collective, which is our full hunts.
Yep.
Then we have Unlocked, and the Unlocked series is gaining a lot of traction because it's myself, Casey, Matt, and Adam from Land Legacy sitting down on each hunt, and we're breaking down each hunt with the assistance of OnX and why, what, when, and how, and why are we doing what we're doing from a hunting strategy and a habitat strategy to help educate others on what we're doing and our successes and our failures. And so that is gaining a lot of traction. It's just the 4 of us breaking down the hunt, and it's been fun.
I bet that's valuable. I mean, we just tried to do it here, right? I mean, having that discussion and somebody being able to see what you guys are talking about and then try to apply it to their own place, I could see it being super popular.
Yeah, so it's growing a lot of traction. So, and then we have the Chronicles, which is my old hunts that never made anything out. We're throwing those up, and now we're working on a new series called P3, which is Plan, Prep, Pursue. And we're going to do everything behind the scenes of showing more people, whether it's setting up a bow, setting up a gun, maybe warm season grasses mix, what are we doing? Those type of things that are going to be in the field type stuff. We're going to launch that sometime this summer. So these type of conversations are what's spinning that off of all the phone calls that I take and people walking down and grabbing me and saying, hey, why are you doing this? Or how are you doing that? I'm like, God, there's a series here. So we're gonna start working on that this summer.
Cool.
Awesome.
Very cool, man. Well, we appreciate the time this afternoon and look forward to watching more progression on your properties and on the show.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on. And hey, let's do it again. This is fun stuff.
Man, absolutely. The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Rack Hub.
Well, dude, sheds are starting to hit the ground.
Yeah, and although we usually don't find many of them, we've done pretty well this season so far.
I would say for just a handful of walks, we've got a pile of sheds to show for it. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, if shed season would end today, I think it was pretty successful.
So this year we're partnering with Rack Hub. It's an antler mounting system for your sheds.
Yeah, and obviously people have watched our podcast. We've got this massive pile of sheds that are on the table at all times, but you guys took the time to set up Wide Boy Shed on the R1, which is a really cool way to now have that thing right off to my left-hand side during the podcast.
So some of these sheds just call for a little bit more appreciation, I guess. So rather than being on a pile on the table, we're going to mount them on the wall, and they look awesome. So
yeah. And so if anybody wants to try Rack Hub, you can use the code HUNTR10, HUNTR10 at rackhub.com to get 10% off your order.
Use Rack Hub to make the most of your shed season.
Greg Glesinger.
Oh, man, what a guy.
Yeah. I mean, I love talking to people not only that share the passion, but have experience, way more experience than we do with things that we have on our horizons of like, we want to do these goals. We want to do this stuff.
Yeah. Well, he's accomplished. Yeah. Maybe I'm re-saying what you just said, but yeah, he's accomplished a lot of what we would, what we strive for. He's also one of those guys that you just want to like, you could just, there's a lot going on behind the eyes. So you're like, you just want to like listen and learn.
It's just successful and stuff. It's also always encouraging to hear somebody say, well, I've done this. I messed these ones up. I sold this. I waited too long here, but like I have a dream farm. I have a forever farm.
Yeah.
And that's like, anybody that's at our level that's looking to buy and like, hunting and deer our life is like the dream farm or the forever farm is an end goal. It's like everybody wants to have one of those farms where you're like, this is just the greatest thing ever and I'll never sell it. And you'll have a lot of misses on the way, just like Greg did, but
well, and it doesn't just happen. It's not something you're going to buy on market. It's probably not something that's going to be that when you buy it either.
No. But that's the fun part, as long as the potential is there to make it that.
Yeah. And most people will never do it. I think that's what, a big thing Greg's putting in the process is like, hey, it's there. It can be done. It's hard. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of effort and it's going to suck in some the sacrifice element. But it is there.
It's there
for the taking.
I'm sure that we'll have Greg back on at some point soon. But appreciate everyone listening to episode 237. HUNTR Podcast, and we're into February. Before you know it, it'll be March, so we'll just keep plugging away.
Some sheds on the table next
I'm
time.
hoping maybe we'll have some sheds on the table for the next podcast, but we'll catch you next week, and appreciate everyone listening.
Later.
Take me